Chapter 24-22. It was important to know the location of the Zhao family manor, but more importantly, the Joint Command learned from these captives what happened to the Zhao family recently. Yanglan alone turned the entire Zhao family upside down. After listening to the descriptions of the captives, the cultivators in charge of the interrogation couldn't believe their ears. If a captive said so, perhaps the cultivators of the spiritual world would think that this was a scheme of the Zhao family. However, if several captured cultivators said so, I'm afraid it was not a simple conspiracy. Not to mention the captives captured from other places, they also said the same thing. Even if they used the strongest hypnosis methods, the statements of these captives did not change at all. This could only explain one thing. That is, everything that happened was true. The news was sent to the top management of the Joint Command. After hearing the news, the reaction of the top management was exactly the same as that of the cultivators in charge of the interrogation. They couldn't believe it at all. The Zhao family, which was so powerful that the major sect in the spiritual world had to unite to deal with it, would actually fall apart because of one person? This sounded like a joke, but whether it was the news from the captives or the situation encountered by the elite masters in front, there was no flaw in this. After confirming that this was not a joke or a lie to comfort them, but a fact that really happened, the top management of the Joint Command suddenly had a feeling of not knowing whether to laugh or cry. They worked hard to find ways to kill the opponent's golden Immortal master. When they were worried about how to deal with the remaining Zhao family masters, they suddenly found that the other party had internal strife and their strength was greatly reduced. The punch that was full of strength directly hit the air, which made people feel unspeakably uncomfortable. However, no one would dislike such a good thing as weakening the enemy's strength by more than half without paying any price. When they thought that the enemy's internal strife directly killed millions of masters of the Zhao family, and also divided the internal disunity into several scattered groups, the Joint Command, from the island master to the sect representatives who could only sit on the sidelines, all of them were happy from the bottom of their hearts. Yanglan, who was once regarded as a great enemy of the spiritual world, did a great job. If it weren't for this guy being an enemy of the spiritual world for a long time, several sect masters would have given this guy a big commendation. How many Xian immortal cultivators have been busy for thousands of years and failed to complete it, but Yanglan completed it in less than 1,000 years. This efficiency would definitely make people's jaws drop. When the upper echelons of the Joint Command calmed down and carefully pondered over the situation, they also felt an incomparable sympathy for the Zhao family. This had nothing to do with his standpoint. It was purely out of sympathy for a powerful force that had been destroyed by him. Yanglan was rescued from the Xintian sect by the Zhao family. Before he was rescued, Yanglan was already a useless person. The Xintian sect kept him only for punishment and revenge, because the Xintian sect felt that Yanglan was related to the destruction of the Taishaman in the mortal world. The original intention of the Zhao family to save Yanglan was just to know some more detailed information. Since they knew that Yanglan was a Taishaman in the mortal world, but he destroyed the Taishaman, it was obvious that he was a traitor. The Zhao family still did not accept the lesson. Obviously, as long as the news was tortured, they could kill or banish him, but they took the initiative to keep Yanglan. It could be said that the Zhao clan had only themselves to blame for falling to such a state. The experience of Yanglan in the Zhao family that was known from the captives' mouths was a clear history of Yanglan's struggle in the Zhao family. He climbed up little by little and slowly became more and more important. He came into contact with more and more high-level masters of the Zhao family, which also provided him with various opportunities to control the puppets. To describe the Zhao family in one sentence, it was that they wouldn't die if they didn't seek death. The spiritual world's version of the farmer and the snake, the spiritual world's version of the Zhongshan wolf. But the Zhao family was all stupid and had a tragic ending. Knowing that Yanglan's special skill was to control the puppets using the Great Freedom Demon Heart Sutra, how could they not be prepared? They knew that Yanglan had controlled many cultivators in the spiritual world by this trick, and even used this trick in the process of destroying the Xintian sect, but they did not guard against it. Wasn't this rushing themselves to death? Did the Zhao family's top management naively think that Yang Lan had a sense of belonging and absolute loyalty to the Zhao family, and would not have any ideas about so many supermasters around him? The problem was that the Zhao family's top management was really brainless. They naively thought that they saved Yang Lan, gave Yang Lan a new life, and improved Yang Lan's cultivation, which would make Yang Lan feel grateful. Perhaps they felt that the Zhao family was the most powerful, with so many masters and so many golden immortals. Yang Lan did not dare to do anything. Who could have thought that it would end like this? While lamenting the current situation of the Zhao family's collapse, the top management of the Joint Command also secretly reported in their hearts. They reached a consensus in an instant that no matter how good this Yang Lan was for the spiritual world, such a dangerous guy must not be left alive. No matter which sex cultivator met Yang Lan, the first thing to do was to kill him without mercy. Otherwise, they could not guarantee that they would not be the next puppet controlled by him. Despite the division of the Zhao family and the huge losses caused by the internal strife, they were still the Zhao family, and they still had the power to make people unable to look at them. The Joint Commander had just recovered from the surprise of knowing Yang Lan's great achievements, and he was immediately hit in the head. The elite team released by the Joint Command to lure the enemy, after a series of victories, sneaked to the Zhao family's lair. As a result, they were discovered, and the Zhao family's masters came out, leading to the annihilation of more than 2,000 Xian immortal masters in the elite team. But before these elite masters died, they successfully trapped the huge Zhao family's lair with several formations. This was originally the method that these masters intended to use. As a result, they were discovered by others, so they had no choice but to fight with others. They covered their companions in arranging all the formations and activating them. Although in the end, even the masters who activated the formation were killed, the formation succeeded in completely binding hundreds of thousands of cultivators in the Zhao family's lair. The formation used by the elite masters was a variant of the demon sealing formation. This was carefully improved by the major sect on the basis of the demon sealing formation. It directly borrowed the principle of the heaven and earth infinite spirit suppressing formation to extract spiritual power from the demon realm to besiege the opponent. It could be said that before those spiritual veins were exhausted, almost all the cultivators of the Zhao family would be trapped in that huge formation and would never be able to come out. The Zhao family, the mortal enemy of the spiritual world, had become a turtle in a jar. Chapter 24-23. The demon sealing formation was a formation that Yang Chun had obtained from the Zhao family's manor in the mortal world, and it spread to all the major sect in the mortal world. After arriving in the spiritual realm, the formation experts of the major sect had made extremely abnormal improvements to the formation. The new demon seal array that was now used to block the Zhao family was a super demon seal array that combined the abnormal methods of at least 6 super sections. The source of the spiritual power of the array was also one of the main culprit arrays of the mortal world's greatest heaven sect. The universe everlasting spirit suppressing formation was a trick to grab spiritual power in the world, but this time it grabbed the spiritual veins of the monster realm. Over the past few days, the spies of the various sect in the spiritual realm had not only explored the way, but also had an important responsibility, which was to leave behind subformations of the heaven and earth infinite vitality suppression formation wherever they passed. As long as these subformations covered a place, the overall formation would be able to absorb spiritual power. The purpose of setting up these arrays was to prepare for the super demon sealing array in case of a rainy day. The other reason was to test the reaction of the expert from the Zhao family, Long Can, to see if he really had no time to care about other things. You must know that this was a crazy spirit power formation. In the mortal world, because of this formation, the cultivators in the world were forced to stand opposite the greatest heaven sect and became the enemy of the greatest heaven sect. Long Kim was an expert of the Zhao family, so it was impossible for him not to know how powerful this formation was. If Long Kim had really hidden his strength, he would definitely react to such a formation. Otherwise, the spiritual power of the demon realm that he controlled would be absorbed on a large scale. If he absorbed too much, his strength would definitely be lower than that of Gong Sunling's side, and Gong Sunling would occupy more space. This would depend on whether Longkin thought that his natal Dharma treasure was more important or if he hid his strength. If Longkin didn't react, perhaps he really didn't have the spare strength to deal with the cultivators in his spatial Dharma treasure. In that case, the people from the spiritual realm could consider entering the opponent's space to exterminate the Zhao family. From the looks of it, Longkin hadn't targeted any cultivator at all. Even when the Zhao family's lair had been trapped, he hadn't done anything. Perhaps he really didn't have any strength left and was completely tied up by Gong Sunling. This was good news for the Joint Command, but several of the sect masters in the Joint Command were not completely sure. This was because some of the disciples they sent out had special missions. In addition to setting up subformations, special disciples also had a secret mission, which was to leave a jade slip with information recorded near each subformation. The contents of the jade slips were pretty much the same. They were all about which sect had the intention to recruit experts from the Dragon Tribe, and left them at these places for Longkin to see. The benefits that each sect promised were different. They used their own methods to pull Longkin into their sect's camp. Unfortunately, not a single cultivator had received Longkin's reply. Under such circumstances, everyone could only do their best to deal with the Zhao family. Luring Longkin could wait until later. In fact, while the various sects sent cultivators into the demon realm under Longkin's control, some sect masters also sent many cultivators into the Mountain River geographical map. The two most popular Dharma treasures were Longkin's spatial Dharma treasure and Gong Sunling's Mountain River geographical map. At least for now, the two Dharma treasures seemed to be evenly matched. Since there were people who were tempted by Longkin's spatial Dharma treasure, there would inevitably be more people who were tempted by Gong Sunling's Mountain River geographical map. However, no cultivator was stupid enough to directly target the Mountain River geographical map. That was no different from directly jumping out to challenge the Joint Command. Only people who were tired of living would do that. However, not taking action directly didn't mean that they couldn't first explore the Mountain River geographical map. At the very least, it wouldn't be too much to take a look at what was in the refined space, right? If no one knew that they sneaked into the Mountain River geographical map, Gong Sunling would not hesitate to directly control them. However, now a large group of spiritual realm cultivators were in the Mountain River geographical map. If Gong Sunling didn't want her husband and Chunyang Palace to become the new public enemy of the spiritual realm, she couldn't do that. Therefore, Gong Sunling could only isolate some things that couldn't be seen so that outsiders couldn't see them. What things couldn't be known to the cultivators of other sect in the spiritual realm? A lot. First of all, the heavenly tribulation couldn't be known casually. If the cultivators of the spiritual realm knew that there was a complete heavenly tribulation in the spiritual realm in the Mountain River geographical map, all the sect would definitely go crazy. It should be known that there were hundreds of millions of natives in the spiritual realm, and they couldn't become real cultivators because they couldn't pass the heavenly tribulation. The existence of the heavenly tribulation would definitely make all the sect tempted. An innocent man would get into trouble because of his wealth. After provoking the greed of all parties and destroying the Zhao family, all parties would immediately turn around and target Gong Sunling, Yang Chun, and Chunyang Palace. Yang Chun had a deep understanding of this. In his previous life, Fatty Jing was very unhappy because the heavenly tribulation room in the Conch underwater mansion was forcibly controlled by the Xintian sect. In addition, such a large number of cultivators of all levels couldn't be seen by the cultivators of the spiritual realm. The reason was the same. When the higher-ups of the Joint Command found out that they had finally killed the Zhao family that forced them to join forces to deal with them, a large force that was even more terrifying than the Zhao family immediately jumped out. How could they sleep? If they didn't find a way to put them to death or control them under their control, those guys would never give up. For Longkin, it might not be easy to hide and control things in his space in the confrontation with Gong Sunling, but for Gong Sunling and the third primordial spirit, it was simple. Gong Sunling and Yang Chun cultivated the highest mystery Yin-Yang Heart Sutra, and their divine sense cultivation was also at the late stage of Almighty Immortal, and the third primordial spirit, was at the peak of almighty Immortal. The two of them working together was really a bit of a bully. Therefore, even in the competition with Long Can, the third primordial spirit still had the ability to conceal everything in the mountain river geographical map. At least, those guys who explored the way could only see what he wanted them to see, not the truth. It had to be said that sometimes all parties were on guard against each other and plotted against each other. It was also a kind of helplessness in this kind of cooperation. On the contrary, it was not as efficient as the Zhao family's unity. In any case, most of the cultivators of the Zhao family had been blocked, and various signs also showed that Long Can did not spare any of the cultivators who entered his space. So it was obvious that the end of the Zhao family had come. The Zhao family, who had no way out, was now a turtle in a jar. It was only when the other parties in the spiritual realm would harvest it. Chapter 24:24. The matter of destroying the Zhao family had to be done as soon as possible. Everyone knew that the demon sealing array actually came from the Zhao family. After being modified according to the Zhao family's formation, no one knew how long it could trap the cultivators of the Zhao family. It was better to end this matter quickly. The elites who were eliminated did not die in vain. Not only did they block the Zhao family, but they also revealed Long Can's current state to all parties. It could be said that they died a worthy death. Of course, before they set off, most of them had already left their original primordial spirit on their respective divine, perching jade. Even if they died, it was just another experience. In order to deal with the Zhao family, Yang Chun took out the last batch of divine, perching jade and sold it to the major sect at the market price. This was in exchange for the elite masters and scrupulous behavior. After taking out the divine, perching jade, Yang Chen also announced that there were no more divine, perching jade in his hands. In the future, the cultivators had to find a way not to be killed. The large group of people under the joint command finally set off and went straight to the Zhao family's nest. Of course, not all the cultivators flew at high speed like a swarm of bees. Instead, they entered their own spatial magic treasures according to their respective sections. Then, they were led by a few fellow disciples with high cultivation bases and high speed to fly towards the Zhao family's lair. The various sects had already divided up their forces. Which direction and which sects would be responsible for? They had already made up their minds. Thus, it did not take long for the various sects to get into position. All the cultivators were ready to move out as they prepared for the final attack. Fortunately, although the demon sealing array came from the Zhao family, it was a super demon sealing array that had been improved by countless formation masters. Even though the Zhao family also had many formation masters, they were still helpless. This was thanks to Yang Lan. At that time, in order to deal with all the high-level members of the Zhao family, he controlled a lot of formation masters. Under the counterattack of the high-level members of the Zhao family, these formation masters also suffered heavy casualties, and there were not many left. In addition, this time, Yang Lan wanted to completely destroy the Zhao family and completely annihilate his own identity. He did not let these formation masters help at all. Therefore, all the children of the Zhao family were sealed in the demon sealing array and could not escape. They could only desperately wait for the arrival of the spiritual masters. The dignified Zhao family had reached the point of annihilation. It was a sumptuous feast for the sect in the spiritual realm. One must know that those who could move freely and fight without being affected in the atmosphere of the demon realm were all heaven immortals and above. However, that was not the case for the Zhao clan. Their entire clan stayed here, and all their cultivators were gathered together. In the past, when Long Can could freely control spatial Dharma treasures, there was basically no demonic aura invading the Zhao family manor. This was because Long Can could control the density of the demonic aura in a certain area. But now, Long Can had no time to care about anything else. The demonic aura that had been controlled was now flowing freely. The entire Zhao family was enveloped in a dense demonic aura. The Zhao family juniors with low cultivations could no longer withstand it. They could only hide in the Zhao family manor's unique array formation to live normally. In this way, the Zhao clan, which had millions of cultivators, only had a few 100,000 cultivators who could actually fight. There were more than 20,000 Xian immortal cultivators and more than 100,000 heavenly immortal experts. The number of experts mobilized by the Joint Command was at least 3 times this number. Moreover, it was a number that was equivalent to their cultivation. In other words, this time, the Alliance commander had the absolute advantage, both in terms of numbers and cultivation. As long as this group of more than 100,000 real experts was eliminated, the rest of the Zhao family's disciples could only wait for death. Their cultivation was not enough. In the past, when the Zhao clan was strong, they could be cultivated as a reserve force. However, when it came to the point of life and death, they could not be used. If they were in the spiritual realm, without the interference of the demonic aura, they might be able to fight. In the demon realm, they were at best a group of spectators. The experts of each sect appeared from their spatial Dharma treasures and surrounded the Zhao clan's lair tightly. Outside the super demonic sealing array, another super demonic sealing array was set up to ensure that the Zhao clan's cultivators could not escape from it. Then, the demonic sealing array inside was removed and the feast of killing was unveiled. Although Yanglan sent the Zhao clan's cultivators to their deaths, if he could weaken the strength of some major sect in the process, it would also clear the way for the development of Chunyang Palace in the future. He now regarded himself as a disciple of Chunyang Palace. So for the future of Chunyang Palace, Yanglan directly controlled these experts of the Zhao clan and began to fight desperately. The largest battle since ancient times had begun. One side of the battle had an absolute advantage in strength and numbers, while the other side had the complete belief that they would die. With the thought that killing one was enough, killing two was more than enough, and killing two was more than enough. The two sides began to fight crazily. When the two sides, who never intended to compromise, began to fight, the entire area within hundreds of thousands of miles became blood-stained. Countless magic treasures went on a rampage, regardless of whether they were friends or foes, killing until the sky turned dark. This battle lasted for a full 2 months from the beginning. The spiritual realm paid the price of tens of thousands of cultivators' deaths before the Zhao clan's experts were completely beheaded. Those experts of the Zhao clan knew that they would die, and almost all chose to self-destruct before they died. This move alone caused at least 4 times the number of cultivators of the spiritual realm to suffer various degrees of injuries. At this point, the top management of the Alliance commander finally breathed a sigh of relief. Although there were heavy casualties, they finally gnawed the most difficult bone. The remaining cultivators of the Earth Immortal and Human Immortal realm basically didn't have to worry about them. Even if they made trouble, although their number was as high as millions, in the face of more than 300,000 Xian Immortals and Heaven Immortals, including more than a dozen Golden Immortals, the number was no longer an advantage. Now, the top management of the Alliance commander began to have a headache about how to deal with these Zhao clan's disciples. Although they were not yet prisoners of the sect in the spiritual realm, everyone had already regarded them as prisoners. This large number of prisoners also began to worry about the top management of the Alliance commander. Kill them all? These were millions of disciples of the Zhao clan. Moreover, it was not auspicious to kill prisoners. As cultivators, it was not good to do such inhumane things. But it was even more impossible to let them go. With so many disloyal people, wouldn't it make all the sect uneasy to eat and sleep? Or should they disperse and turn them into slaves of many experts? This might be a solution, but it was not a solution that could reassure all the sect. Just when all the top management were having a headache about what to do, the remaining disciples of the Zhao clan helped them make a choice. Strictly speaking, it was Yanglan who helped them make a choice. The top management felt that killing prisoners was ominous, but Yanglan never had such a problem. Millions of disciples of the Zhao clan would be buried with him. Chapter 24-25. In the hesitation of the United Nations top management, Yanglan appeared in a dazzling light. To be exact, he was Yanglan's substitute. However, except for Yang Chun and Long Can, no one knew that the Yanglan in front of everyone was fake. Even the cultivators of the Shintian sect who had directly faced Yanglan might not be able to distinguish him, let alone the cultivators of the major sect in the spiritual world who had almost never met Yanglan. But it was strange that when Yanglan stood up, all the cultivators could be sure at a glance that this guy must be the culprit Yanglan who stirred up the spiritual world and then turned the Zhao family upside down. This was an indescribable feeling for everyone, and it was also a feeling that made the Real Yanglan extremely enjoy. Everything that Yanglan had done before, from the beginning, was actually very simple. It was to make himself stronger than Yangchun and have a better reputation, but he had never done it. On the contrary, at this time, when Yanglan played with the spiritual world and the Zhao family alone, he did it. It was a kind of excitement that no one in the world didn't know him. This kind of excitement was even more wonderful than when Yangchun broke through to the 8th grade alchemist master. At least Yanglan felt so. Yangchun became the strongest alchemist master in the spiritual world, but he was just an alchemist master, a craftsman who did hard work for others. At most, he was a little more skilled, and others wanted his things, so they treated him better. Really, that's all. There would never be any substantial leap in his status. But Yanglan was different. He directly played with the whole world in the palm of his hand. He really used the world as his chessboard, and all the cultivators in the world as his god. How could a mere Yangchun compare with him? What's more, even Yangchun was now one of his chess pieces, wasn't he? The Real Yanglan felt that he was qualified to look down on the world, didn't he? Even if the Yanglan died today, his deity could still unknowingly become the controller of a brand new super sect, and also master 1 or 2 super space magic weapons. Is there a more successful cultivator in this world than him? Yanglan was very powerful. He was surrounded by hundreds of thousands of heaven immortals and mystic immortals, and it was obvious that there was no way out, but he still managed to make his deathbed struggle, which gave all the cultivators in the front line a huge surprise. Among the hundreds of thousands of experts besieging the Zhao family's base, or more precisely, the surviving hundreds of thousands of them, several thousand cultivators suddenly attacked their companions in a frenzied manner. As mentioned earlier, although the top executives of the Spiritual World Joint Command have realized the harm of Yanglan's Great Free Demon Heart Sutra, they have also done a huge investigation in the entire spiritual world, trying to find the puppets controlled by Yanglan. However, the spiritual world is too big, and there are always some fish that have escaped the net. Although the spiritual world had discovered tens of thousands of cultivators controlled by Yanglan and made effective control, it could not be denied that many cultivators in the spiritual world, especially the supermasters of the big sect, always had some privileges. Some Shin immortals or fairy immortals did not believe that they would be controlled by Yanglan even if they had never been in contact with him. They did not believe that Yanglan, whose cultivation had been abolished by the Shintian sect, could set off a big storm. Therefore, during the large-scale investigation in the spiritual world, these masters and famous seniors would never cooperate so obediently. As seniors, the juniors in charge of the investigation did not dare to do anything to them. Moreover, these cultivators had never shown any abnormalities, so they naturally became privileged people and did not need to be inspected. Yanglan despised these people. They looked down on themselves too much, including Yangchun. It was the same for Yangchun. If Yangchun didn't also enjoy the privilege, how could he not be discovered, right? There were such cultivators in every sect, and from the current situation, there were many of them. Yanglan was also very smart. When he discovered that the spiritual world had discovered his conspiracy, not only did he not immediately launch these controlled puppets, but he also decisively endured and let these people stay until the end. It was not that he was optimistic about the spiritual world and not optimistic about the Zhao family at that time, but Yanglan had learned to be careful in his previous experience. He had learned not to put all his chips on one bet. Leaving these puppets in the spiritual world was the capital for his comeback. There was no loss when there was a bet. As long as the bet was still there was no need to liquidate it. Sure enough, the subsequent battle also proved the correctness of Yanglan's caution. Before refining the spiritual world, Yanglan still felt that the Zhao family would win. However, in just a few months, the battle situation took a sharp turn until it was out of control, which made Yanglan have the plan to give up the Zhao family. The betrayal of a few thousand cultivators did not account for the majority in a large team of hundreds of thousands. It should have been a very small matter. However, the trouble was in Yanglan's control strategy. After receiving the lesson from the Xiantian sect, the puppets controlled by Yanglan were all key figures. It might not be a big problem for a few thousand ordinary cultivators to suddenly counterattack, but if a few thousand key cultivators played this trick, it would be a disaster. No one would guard against the sudden attack of their companions who were fighting side by side with them not long ago. The number of cultivators who died directly reached more than 20,000. In a short moment, it caused a quarter of the damage that the elites of the Zhao family had caused to the spiritual world in 2 months. The cultivators of the spiritual world who reacted immediately began to fight back. After all, everyone was a cultivator, and they were all old monsters who had lived for at least thousands of years. Although it was rare for their companions to turn against them, it was not unseen. After a short distraction, there was a fierce counterattack. In any case, the cultivators of the spiritual world were still superior in all aspects. In just a few hours, the outcome was decided. The spiritual world occupied an absolute advantage and wiped out the traitors. But the price paid made the hearts of the top leaders of the major sect in the spiritual world bleed. Before dying, each puppet did not hesitate to self-destruct magic weapons, self-destruct arrays, and self-destruct themselves. They brought the greatest casualties to the cultivators of the spiritual world as much as possible. This was the value of them being able to live to the present. When the last puppet was self-destructed, the top leaders of the Joint Command already wanted to tear Yanglan's body into pieces. This guy had only appeared for a few hours, and he had brought tens of thousands of casualties to the spiritual world. The direct death toll was more than 30,000. This guy must not be left alive. Yanglan had always looked at this battle from the perspective of a god. His real body was not in the demon sealing array. Watching all this happen, Yanglan knew that it was time to really end it. Chapter 24-26. Even if there were tens of thousands more casualties, the remaining hundreds of thousands of Xian Immortals and Heaven Immortals still had an absolute advantage against the millions of Earth Immortals and Human Immortals of the Zhao family. Perhaps it should not be said so simply. It should be said that these experts of the spiritual realm completely controlled the life and death of the remaining Zhao family disciples. This was the true definition of absolute control. There were less than one or more Xian immortal cultivators among the remaining Zhao family cultivators. They were Yanglan's followers. This was normal to normal. It would be a joke if all the Xian immortal cultivators were killed in one fell swoop. These more than 100 Xian immortal cultivators were obviously Yanglan's capital to open a bloody path to escape. In fact, when the puppets madly attacked the cultivators around them, they were actually concentrated in one direction. The purpose was to open a path for Yanglan. In the end, the cultivators of the spiritual realm still quickly got rid of those puppets and blocked the path in time. At this point, if Yanglan could still run away, then all the cultivators present, including the top management of the Joint Command who was in charge of the command, could all be killed. A cooked duck could still fly. This matter concerned the faces of all the cultivators participating in the battle, all the senior leaders of the Joint Command, and almost all the big shots in the spiritual realm. This time, they could only win and not lose. Yanglan had to die. This was the bottom line. Yanglan also noticed this and began to jump the wall in desperation. When he was forced back to the Zhao family's lair by a large number of cultivators, he realized this point. This time, he might not be spared. Since he was going to die, then he would die a more spectacular death. The more than 100 Xian immortal cultivators who followed Yanglan were quickly killed. Yanglan ran fast and escaped back to the Zhao family's lair. Now, Yanglan was the only Xian immortal cultivator left in the Zhao family. But this did not mean that the Zhao family's Earth Immortals and Human Immortals had no power to resist at all. Even if their cultivation was far from enough, this was the Zhao family's lair after all. The Zhao family had been operating here for no less than tens of thousands of years. How could they not have any power to resist? After escaping back to the Zhao family's manor, Yanglan's first order was to launch all the final counterattack methods in the Zhao family's lair. These counterattack methods had been perfected by the Zhao clan generation after generation, all for the sake of dealing the greatest blow to the invading enemy in a situation like the current one. The higher-ups of the United Command had made a mistake. In order to prevent the Zhao family's disciples from escaping, they had used 2 layers of the super demon sealing array to seal all the Zhao family's disciples in the demon sealing array. It could be said that using this formation in the early stages was correct because so long as a single mysterious immortal realm expert escaped, then the entire radiant dimension would probably be unable to eat and sleep in peace. However, when the Zhao family only had human immortals and earth immortals left, and hundreds of thousands of Shin immortals and earth immortals surrounded the Zhao family, this formation was no longer of much use and should be removed immediately. However, all the higher-ups wanted to finish the battle in one fell swoop. They wanted to achieve a complete victory and annihilate all of them. This gave the Zhao clan's juniors a chance to counterattack. The Zhao clan's counterattack did not rely on a large number of people to charge forward, which was no different from courting death. Their method was an ultimate destruction formation that had been set up for tens of thousands of years in the entire Zhao clan's lair for hundreds of thousands of miles. When the Zhao clan's lair began to shine, some experts realized that something was wrong. Without thinking, they immediately soared into the sky and then used their strongest defensive magic treasures and defensive formations, trying their best to remind their companions around them to join forces to resist. Just as they finished setting up their defenses, the terrifying destruction descended. Within a radius of millions of miles, it was a scene of doomsday. At the same time, all sorts of explosions started inside and outside the super demon sealing array, the explosion of the spirit veins, and the seamless all-out attacks of various attributes. Not only were there the spirit veins controlled by the Zhao clan in this area, but there were also millions of Zhao family's disciples who sacrificed all their spiritual power and cultivation base to self-destruct. The people of the Zhao family already knew what would happen to them. The sects of the spiritual realm would not let them go. Rather than dying, they would rather die with a bang. It would be perfect if they could drag a few scapegoats down with them. If the demon sealing array outside was completely opened, there would be space for them to dodge and move. Perhaps the elites of the spiritual realm would have a chance to escape the final blow of these destruction formations. Unfortunately, in order to prevent the Zhao clan from escaping, a large part of these super demon sealing arrays were aimed at sealing the sky. This was equivalent to the power of all the destruction formations within a radius of hundreds of thousands of miles within the demon sealing array being concentrated in the demon sealing array, squeezing, superimposing, and then acting on all the cultivators inside. If these cultivators could be given half an incense stick's time to prepare in advance and let them defend, there would not be too many casualties. In the end, the range of the destruction formations was too large, and it was very likely that they could block it if they focused on a single point of defense. Unfortunately, there were not so many ifs in this world. The elites of the spiritual realm were the closest to victory, and just when they had one foot in the door of victory, a tragedy broke out. The cultivators of the Zhao clan were already prepared to die. Under the explosion of such a large-scale destruction formation, they were all smashed to pieces. Then, their broken bones and flesh turned into powder in the subsequent explosion, leaving not even their bones behind. Hundreds of thousands of cultivators of the spiritual realm were caught off guard and hurriedly defending, causing the largest number of casualties in the battle with the Zhao clan. 1/3 of the elite cultivators fell, and at least 1/3 of the experts who fell directly died. Of the remaining 2/3, half were seriously injured. When the explosion of the destruction formations was over, the higher-ups of the United Command looked at the devastated battlefield in front of them and wanted to cry, but had no tears. Even if they did not count the casualties, they could see how tragic it was just by looking at it with their naked eyes. 2 hours later, the rough statistics of the battlefield were sent to the higher-ups of the United Command. Less than 1% of the Xian Immortal experts died, and many were injured. Most of them were protecting the Heaven Immortal experts around them. The Heaven Immortal experts were the main force of the casualties, which reached hundreds of thousands. It could be said that after this battle, the strength of the major sect in the spiritual realm had directly regressed by at least 1,000 years. Such a price was truly too painful to pay. There was only one good news, or rather two. The first was that the Zhao clan was finally completely annihilated, and they did not have to worry about any counterattacks from the Zhao clan in the future. The second good news was that when they were cleaning up the battlefield, some cultivators picked up Yanglan's body parts. The dismembered body, with only half of the body and head left, was sent to the higher-ups of the United Command. Chapter 24-27. The top management of the Joint Command had always been in the safest place. Except for the 6 Golden Immortals imprisoned by Yang Chun, the Golden Immortal experts of the other sect were here to protect them. Even if it was the Destruction Formation, these Golden Immortals had no harm. They had the absolute ability to protect the safety of the top management of the sect. Therefore, there were no casualties among the top management of the Joint Command. However, hundreds of thousands of elite experts were distributed in a radius of hundreds of thousands of miles. No matter how powerful the Golden Immortal experts were, they could only protect the cultivators within a radius of hundreds of miles. No matter how large the range was, they could not do anything. Yanglan's head was still intact. There was still a kind of unwillingness on his face. He did not even close his eyes. His eyes, which had lost their light, still showed a strong sense of regret. It had to be said that Yanglan's stand-in performance was very vivid. It was really too vivid. Under the control of Yanglan, the performance of a guy who died with unfulfilled ambitions was very vivid. This happened under the eyes of hundreds of thousands of experts. While several Golden Immortal experts were protecting themselves and the top management, they did not forget to keep an eye on Yanglan, the enemy of the spiritual world. Therefore, what happened over there was really in their eyes. From the beginning of the Destruction Formation to turning into such a corpse, Yanglan was under the surveillance of the experts. In other words, this was the real body of Yanglan. It was not a fake, nor was it a play. He really put himself in the last hit. It was a very obvious dying struggle, and there was no trace of it being a rehearsal. None of the millions of cultivators of the Zhao family were left in the explosion of the Destruction Formation. Several Golden Immortal experts divined since swept through the area. Basically, all the formations had been detonated, and there was no one alive in the core area of the Zhao family's lair. Yanglan was dead, and half of his corpse was in front of them. This could not be faked. However, the top management was worried about whether Yanglan had already gotten the dwelling divine jade through other channels. After all, the masters controlled by Yanglan in the spiritual world had a very high status. It was very simple to get the dwelling divine jade from them. However, fortunately, there was only a batch of dwelling god jade at the beginning. It was distributed after the major sect brought it back to their own sect. Later, after the Joint Command and deployment, the buyers who bought the dwelling god jade directly went to a special secret pavilion in Chunyang Palace to leave their life source primordial spirit before they could take away the dwelling god jade. Later, Yanglan had no chance to get in touch with the dwelling god jade. Of course, no one could guarantee that Yanglan was completely dead. However, there was another way to verify this, and that was to use the puppets that were still being controlled in the spiritual realm. If Yanglan was resurrected by the dwelling god jade, and his life source primordial spirit had not changed, the controlled puppets could still be checked out. When the time comes, as long as they check them, they can know whether Yanglan is dead or alive. It must be known that it was easy to control a puppet with the Great Unfettered Demon Heart Sutra, but it was impossible to disconnect from that puppet. This was determined by the characteristics of the Great Unfettered Demon Heart Sutra itself, and even Yanglan could not change it. Yanglan himself also expected this. However, unlike the Great Unfettered Demon Heart Sutra that everyone thought, the Great Unfettered Demon Heart Sutra that Yanglan was now cultivating had been very unique improvements by Yanglan. It was no longer the previous Great Unfettered Demon Heart Sutra. Before, There was a defect in the cultivation method that could not be disconnected from the puppet, but Yang Lan had gotten a perfect solution here. At the moment when the substitute died, Yang Lan was very clever to disconnect all his puppets except for Yang Chun and Long Can, allowing them to regain their freedom. Since he wanted to act, he had to do it perfectly. In the future, Yang Lan only needed to control Yang Chun and Long Can, and that was enough. Someone was already investigating this, and the top executives of the Joint Command were just waiting for the results of the investigation. However, millions of cultivators of the Zhao family had all disappeared in front of their own eyes. For the entire spiritual world, it could be regarded as a serious disease. All the cultivators who witnessed all of this breathed a sigh of relief, and the big stone in their hearts fell to the ground. In these short thousands of years, the damage that the Zhao family had brought to the spiritual world had been unacceptable to all the cultivators. At least millions of cultivators had been killed or injured in the spiritual world. Now it was finally over. Countless cultivators stared at the Zhao family's lair that had become a dead city. Some felt that their great hatred had been avenged, and some felt that they had gotten rid of the tyrants. In short, there were all kinds of feelings in their hearts. The top executives of the Joint Command had also removed a large piece of their worries. Yang Lan's move before his death had saved them too much trouble. At least they didn't have to worry about how to settle the millions of Zhao family children anymore. Yang Lan had already dragged them all to be buried with him. The people who investigated quickly got the results. Those puppets controlled in the Immortal's cave magic weapons, at the moment of Yang Lan's death, felt that there was a clear sound of something breaking in their sea of consciousness. The whole person felt a lot more relaxed. Even because of the influence of the Great Freedom Demon Heart Sutra, their spiritual awareness cultivation at that moment had increased a lot. At least hundreds of masters were able to break through a small realm as a result. These facts also meant that Yang Lan, the conspirator of the spiritual world, was completely dead. The cultivators no longer had to worry about being inexplicably controlled and becoming puppets. The stone that was blocked in people's hearts was one less piece. This feeling of almost no fear was really so fascinating. Before they discovered the Zhao family, it seemed that everyone had lived such a happy life, but it was not as relaxed as it was now. At least tens of thousands of people had improved their realms in this feeling of understanding, and there was a sound of jubilation around. However, the top executives of the Joint Command could not be happy. The Zhao family was destroyed, and Yang Lan was also dead. However, in this battle alone, the Xian Immortal and Heaven Immortal masters of the various sects in the spiritual world paid the price of hundreds of thousands of casualties. On average, the huge loss could make the sect master of each sect extremely distressed. This was not counting the cultivators who had died in various previous events. Some numbers were simply unimaginable. It could be said that because of the Zhao family, the average loss of almost half of the cultivators in the spiritual world was almost halved. The casualties could no longer be described as heavy. It was simply shocking. In addition, so far the whole incident was not over. The Zhao family was gone, and Yang Lan was dead. However, there was still a dragon master, Long Can, who had the ability to refine the spiritual world before. He was now in a stalemate with Gong Sunling in order to refine the other party's space magic weapon, unable to get away. This Dragon Clan expert was left alone. Many sects began to think of ways to deal with him. Chapter 24-28. Being on the side of the demon realm that was refined by Long Can, even the most ambitious guy would not dare to do anything here easily. Once Long Can was unhappy, it would not be a problem to take down everyone here at the cost of losing some of the demon realm's territory. Therefore, since the Zhao family had achieved such a brilliant result and Yang Lan had been killed, why were hundreds of thousands of cultivators still risking staying here? Was it not good to wait for Long Can? In addition, there were heavy casualties on all sides. There were no less than tens of thousands of people who were seriously injured and dying. At this time, if they didn't hurry back to find Master Yang for help, were they still wasting time here? The island master waved his hand, and hundreds of thousands of experts quickly entered the space of their respective sect. Then the experts with high cultivation and fast speed immediately left with them. The battlefield here was not cleaned up. Of course, they couldn't find anything even if they cleaned up. When the destruction formation exploded, all the shaped things were all turned into powder. What else was there to find? The experts ran all the way until they returned to Gong Sunling's Mountain River geographical map. Only then did they feel relieved. The senior members of the major sects immediately went to find Yang Chun. This time, there were too many injured disciples. The ordinary injuries were okay. Some of the seriously injured ones would not be able to survive without Yang Chen's medicinal pills. At this time, Yang Chen's price was what it was. After all, no matter how valuable the property was, it could not be compared to the lives of so many fairy immortal disciples. As long as they could get life-saving medicinal pills, they would accept any price. What made the senior officials feel comfortable was that Master Yang did not take advantage of the situation at this time. What was the highest price at the last auction of Wanbao Tower? It was still the same now, and there was no increase in price. Although it was the highest price, this was the price that the major sect used to buy Master Yang's medicinal pills in large quantities. It could be said that Master Yang gave face to all parties. Even the 6 sects, such as the Ghosteen sect and the Go Soul sect, which he didn't deal with before, Yang Chun did not refuse. However, these sects still had some restrictions. That was, Yang Chun would only give the 8 grade 8 Lingji mushroom jade pills to the disciples who were seriously injured this time. As for those with minor injuries, they either used the pills refined by their own sect or the pills refined by Yang Chen's disciple, Immortal. It was impossible for them to use the pills refined by Yang Chen himself. This ambiguous attitude towards the sect was enough to make the higher-ups of the sect who came to negotiate feel grateful. Thousands of heavenly immortal disciples were heavily injured and on the verge of death. If Grandmaster Yang still didn't help, they would die from heartache. Fortunately, Grandmaster Yang was magnanimous. Although he didn't give him much face, he still gave him a life-saving pill. As for those lightly injured disciples, since their lives were not in danger, there was no need to worry too much for the time being. Of course, it was just talk, but Imochu Mei's pills still had to be purchased in bulk. This was indirectly giving Master Yang face, and it was also repairing the relationship with Master Yang bit by bit. Not to mention that Imochu Mei's reputation in alchemy was not inferior to Yang Chen's. Even if Imochu Mei refined a pile of useless jelly beans, they would still buy them at the highest price. It took a long time to settle the wounded. Fortunately, with the help of Grandmaster Yang, after everyone was in a hurry, they finally stabilized. In the rear, the great enemy of the spiritual world, the Zhao family, had been completely defeated. Yang Lan, who had given the whole spiritual world a headache, had also been beheaded. The nerves that had been tense before were completely relaxed. As soon as they relaxed, everyone felt a burst of fatigue. Whether they were injured or not, high-level officials or soldiers, they all found a suitable place to rest and recuperate. At this point, Gong Sunling was well prepared. She had prepared a city here early and put dozens of spiritual veins, which was enough to settle all the cultivators. For the Joint Command, this was the performance of Chunyang Palace's hard work, and they would be grateful in the future. However, for Yang Chun and Gong Sunling, it was the improvement of the power of the magic weapons brought by the cultivation of hundreds of thousands of heavenly immortals and Xian immortals in the Mountain River geographical map. This small loss of spiritual power was a little reward for others. After everything settled down, the restless thoughts that he had suppressed because of his worries came back to life again. A dragon clan master at the peak of the Golden Immortal, who had refined more than half of the spiritual world, with such strength, no matter which sect they joined, it would be a strong temptation that could directly make the sect be reborn. If the various sects said that they were not tempted, then they must be lying. Just think about it. They had their own world, and the entire sect could do as they pleased in that world. That was hundreds, thousands, or even 10,000 times better than everyone squeezing into the spiritual realm to fight for the pitiful amount of resources. This alone could make all the sect pay everything they had now. However, temptation was temptation. Whether they could bear the temptation or not, they could see the state of mind of the high-level officials of the major sect. At least in the eyes of Yang Chun, when it came to the state of mind, the four Dao sects seemed to be the most calm. An expert that even the Zhao family might not be able to fully control. How could the various sects make such an expert obediently listen to their orders? However, not all the sect thought as thoroughly as the four Dao sections. Everyone was a cultivator, and they had even done things like cultivating against the heavens. Why would they be afraid that they couldn't find a chance? What if they succeeded? Everyone was tempted, but everyone knew the risks involved. It was just that some sect was willing to bear it, and some sect was not. Now that there was only one enemy that they could not control, everyone naturally had their own thoughts. Some experts once again threw themselves into Long Can's space, try to contact or leave some information for Long Can that he could sense. This matter was basically no secret to Gong Sunling and Yang Chun. However, Yang Chun would not care about these guys. They were rushing to die, and even if Yang Chun persuaded them, it might be seen as having ulterior motives. It was better to watch the show from the sidelines, and the others would have to be grateful. Some people were so tired of living. He really did not know how they had cultivated to their current realm. After the high-level officials of the Alliance Command Center rested for a while, they gathered again and began to discuss the next steps. The spiritual realm was still in a mess, and they had to pull themselves together. All parties had suffered heavy losses, and they needed a long time to recuperate. The discord that had accumulated between the various parties in the past also needed to be resolved. Without external enemies, there would probably only be internal strife left. Fortunately, there was still an expert from the dragon race who was still stubbornly resisting, and all parties were still scheming. At least, before Long Can expressed his stance, all parties could not fight for the time being. From this point of view, all parties should be grateful to Long Can. With his pressure, everyone would be able to live in peace. Long Can was the last enemy that the spiritual realm had to face now. If he was not bragging, he was probably the greatest enemy, and sometimes he was even scarier than the Zhao family. Chapter 24-29. Yang Lan was now also repairing. His original body was in another direction in the spiritual world. He calmly directed the previous counterattack of the Zhao family. After the drama of the treacherous minister being beheaded, he completely gave up control of all the puppets, leaving only Yang Chun and Long Can. Then, in the amazement of Yang Chun and Long Can, Yang Lan actually began to cultivate. They really didn't know where this guy's heart came from. He had just killed millions of people. The blood on his hands was not dry, and there were countless ghosts haunting him. Yet, he could still calm down and cultivate. Gong Sunling did hold Long Can back, making him unable to take care of everything that happened to the Zhao family. Of course, Long Can didn't want to participate in all of this from the bottom of his heart. The death of the Zhao family was the best thing in the world. Then, he would be completely free. Yang Lan did a good job. He directly killed all the Zhao family members and released all the puppets, leaving only Yang Chun and Long Can. For Long Can, it seemed that as long as Yang Lan was dealt with, there would basically be no more restrictions. Do you really think so? Just as Long Can was thinking about this, Yang Lan's thoughts suddenly appeared in Long Can's consciousness. Even someone as strong as Long Can was taken aback by Yang Lan's sudden thought. When he reacted, he realized that Yang Lan was just like Yang Chun. He passed a piece of thought to him through the contact of his spiritual awareness. He could actually send a thought to him unknowingly, and it was not through the spiritual awareness left in his sea of consciousness, but through the spiritual awareness left in Yang Lan's sea of consciousness. It could only mean that Yang Lan had discovered the spiritual awareness left by Long Can in his own sea of consciousness. How did you find out? Long Can was very surprised. He didn't care what harm Yang Lan could do to him. That was impossible. He was just wondering how Yang Lan knew that he had left his spiritual awareness in his sea of consciousness. There was another question, that was, had Yang Chen's spiritual awareness also been discovered by Yang Lan? When Long Can wanted to inform Yang Chun, he suddenly found that he couldn't find Yang Chen's spiritual awareness in Yang Lan's sea of consciousness. Yang Chun had taken the initiative to communicate with Long Kin hadn't taken the initiative even once. When he wanted to take the initiative to look for Yang Chun, there was no trace of him. Interesting. Long Kin also smiled. It seemed that Yang Chun was definitely not a simple person. Although as early as when Yang Chun contacted him, he knew that Yang Chun was not simple, but he did not expect Yang Chun to be so powerful. Yang Chun had already found him, but he had not found Yang Chun. Long Kin would never believe that Yang Lan would have the ability to find Yang Chin's spiritual awareness, even if he could not find it. Needless to say, at this time, Yang Chun must be hiding in some corner to watch the show. Yang Chun definitely did not let Long Kin down. He was indeed hiding to watch the show. The spiritual awareness threads cultivated by the three purities secret art were so secretive that the cultivators who had not come into contact with the three purities secret art absolutely had no idea. That kind of fine to the extreme. Even if Yang Lan's entire sea of consciousness was circled, Yang Lan could not find any abnormalities. Yang Lan's spiritual awareness suddenly collided with Long Kin's spiritual awareness in the sea of consciousness, which made Yang Chun a little unexpected. This guy really couldn't be measured by common sense. His hand alone was enough to make Yang Chun look at him with admiration. It's too easy to find you. Yang Lan's spiritual awareness directly sent a thought over. Under the complacency, Yang Lan didn't even find that in the middle of the collision between him and Long Kin's spiritual awareness, there was a spiritual awareness thread that was so thin that both of them could not detect it. I made a mistake last time, but you were indifferent. I knew it was wrong. Yang Lan did make a mistake. That is, in a hurry, he asked the Zhao family and Long Kin a hand over the refined monster realm to Gong Sunling. At that time, when this order was issued, it was noticed by the great elder of the Zhao family. He immediately realized that he was being controlled, so Yang Lan had to launch it immediately and turn the Zhao family upside down. As Yang Lan said at that time, even the great elder of the Zhao family, who was only at the peak of Immortal, noticed the abnormality, but Long Kin, who was at the peak of the Golden Immortal, did not react at all. This was really abnormal. The only explanation was that Long Kin also noticed that something was wrong, but what Yang Lan did was in line with his intentions. So he sat on a mountain and watched the tigers fight. He didn't say a word, but just watched secretly. The Zhao family mastered the way to control you, and you were forced to swear that you could not deal with the Zhao family. So you used my hand to get rid of the Zhao family. In the thoughts passed by Yang Lan, there was a kind of pride that everything was under control. You even let go of all the masters in the spiritual world just so that they could kill the Zhao family for you. Am I right? That's right. Long Kin wasn't the kind of person who wouldn't admit it to death. Since Yang Lan said it himself, Long Kin naturally admitted it. In fact, you did it quite perfectly. The entire Zhao family was killed by you. In this regard, I have to thank you. It's my honor to receive your praise. At this moment, Yang Lan was not annoyed that he was being controlled by Long Kin, and his thoughts were extremely relaxed. By the way, even if you found something wrong, how did you find my divine sense imprint with your cultivation? This was a problem that Long Kin was very puzzled about, and it was also a problem that Yang Chun did not think clearly for a while. Yang Lan was a cultivator at the middle stage of Immortal, and his divine sense imprint was only at the late stage of Immortal. It was a bit unbelievable that he wanted to find the divine sense imprint of a master at the peak of the Golden Immortal who had deliberately hidden it. Ha ha ha! Yang Lan's laughter came directly. It was a kind of unscrupulous thought that deeply despised Long Kin. It was as if he was laughing at Long Kin's lack of knowledge, and also seemed to be laughing at him for being controlled by the Zhao family for so long that he even forgot to think. After a while, Yang Lan's laughter stopped, and then he passed another thought to Long Kin and also to Yang Chun. You can see what my cultivation is now. Long Kin's divine sense wandered in Yang Lan's sea of consciousness without any disguise. Since it had been discovered, there was no need to be sneaky anymore. On the other hand, Yang Chun still secretly turned around. It had to be said that Yang Lan could always bring unexpected surprises to everyone at certain times. How long had it been? Yang Lan's spiritual power cultivation had not changed much. and he was still at the middle stage of Immortal. However, his divine sense imprint had suddenly jumped from the middle stage of Immortal to the late stage of Golden Immortal. During the time of the dialogue between the two sides through the spiritual awareness imprint, Yang Chun and Long could also perceive that Yang Lan's spiritual awareness cultivation base was still rising wildly. Like a bamboo shoot after the spring rain, it was improving with irresistible force. Chapter 24:30. I said you have no knowledge. Yang Lan's sarcastic tone once again reached Long Can's mind. I'm afraid you don't know what the original intention of the great unrestrained Demon Heart Sutra is. Hearing Yang Lan's words, both Yang Chun and Long Can were stunned. As Yang Lan said, Long Can had basically never been in the mortal world, so he naturally didn't know the real purpose of the great unrestrained Demon Heart Sutra. In his opinion, this was to control the puppets. Was there any other purpose? But Yang Chun was startled, and then he understood it in a flash. The great unrestrained Demon Heart Sutra was a cultivation method of the mortal world. The reason why Yang Lan could come into contact with this demonic art was because of Li Hung, the young master of Taishaman. The original intention of Li Hung's cultivation of the great unrestrained Demon Heart Sutra was not to control any puppets. It was purely for one thing, which was to greatly improve his spiritual awareness cultivation. After Yang Chun arrived in the spiritual world, his spiritual awareness cultivation rose rapidly. So he subconsciously thought that it was normal for other people's spiritual awareness cultivation to be higher than their spiritual power cultivation, but he ignored the original intention of the great unrestrained Demon Heart Sutra. In the end, this was a cultivation method to improve the spiritual awareness cultivation, and controlling the puppets was the side effect of the cultivation method. It was just that there were too many puppets controlled by the great unrestrained Demon Heart Sutra in the spiritual world, and the harm caused was too great. Everyone forgot the true face of the great unrestrained Demon Heart Sutra. Yang Lan did improve the great unrestrained Demon Heart Sutra, but he only improved the concealment of controlling the puppets, and the real function was always there. Before, Yang Lan controlled at least hundreds of thousands of puppets by himself. Under the various distractions of his spiritual awareness, it was normal for his spiritual awareness cultivation and spiritual power cultivation to maintain a balance. But this time, he took the initiative to cut off all the puppets he controlled, and the spiritual awareness that was restrained because of the control of the puppets immediately returned. It was not difficult to explain why Yang Lan's spiritual awareness cultivation soared in a short period of time, from the late Immortal stage to the late Golden Immortal stage, and it was still improving. With such a strong spiritual sense, and the great unrestrained Demon Heart Sutra's ability to raise one sea of consciousness, it wasn't difficult for him to find Long Can's spiritual sense imprint. In the end, Long Can was just a regular cultivator. His divine sense cultivation was equal to his spiritual power cultivation. His divine sense cultivation at the peak of Golden Immortal was not much stronger than Yang Lan's late Golden Immortal. I was careless. Long Can admitted his mistake directly. In the eyes of a cultivator of his level, right was right and wrong was wrong. Since there was no change in Yang Lan, it was his fault and there was nothing to deny. However, what if you found out? Long Can also passed a thought to Yang Lan. Do you still want to control me now? Don't even think about it, right? Why not? Yang Lan's proud thoughts were passed over, which made Yang Chun and Long Can stunned. At this point, what other cards does Yang Lan have? I think you've been spying on me to see if I found out how the Zhao family is controlling you. Yang Lan's thoughts were transmitted very quickly, and he was very proud. Do you think that I didn't find it at all? In fact, it was not only Long Can who was monitoring Yang Lan, but also Yang Chun. Yang Lan's words made both Yang Chun and Long Can stunned at the same time. Did Yang Lan actually find that method under their surveillance? How could he hide from the surveillance of these two masters without revealing any flaws? Since I already know that you have found out, how can I not take any precautions? Yang Lan explained slowly, as if he also wanted Long Can to understand. It was originally impossible, but your bad luck let me find an interesting way. Yang Lan's words made Yang Chun and Long Can interested. It should be known that how many tricks could be played in the sea of consciousness at this level mainly depended on the creativity of each cultivator. Both Yang Chun and Long Can wanted to know what step Yang Lan had taken. When people are under pressure, they will always come up with some unimaginable ideas. Yang Lan seemed to have become a teacher and was dispelling the doubts of two children who did not understand. Since you stay in my sea of consciousness and I can't drive you away for the time being, why don't I create another sea of consciousness? I tried it hundreds of times on those puppets, and I finally understood it. This was Yang Lan's most proud time. How could he not show it completely to let Long Can give up? How could he not express his wisdom and martial arts? So he said slowly and proudly, I successfully created another sea of consciousness, another sea of consciousness that you can't touch. You can't know what I don't want you to know. Long Can and Yang Chun were no longer admiring at the moment, but marveling. Yang Lan could play in the sea of consciousness to this point. It was simply admirable. Even Yang Chun had to extend 2 thumbs up to express his admiration. You know, Yang Chun could split his spiritual awareness because of the 3 Purity secret art. The 3 Purity secret art was a secret art created by the Tao ancestor, and it was not too magical. However, Yang Lan actually relied on the great Free Demon Heart Sutra to create another feat of creating another sea of consciousness. In this regard, it was an insult to describe Yang Lan as a genius. Hiding things that you don't want us to know in another sea of consciousness, admirable. Long Can had the same idea. In the face of such a feat, it was never too much to admire. So, you have actually found a way to control me in the Zhao family? What do you mean by we? Yang Lan did not answer Long Can's question, but keenly grasped a small detail in Long Can's words and asked, Is there anyone else monitoring my sea of consciousness besides you? When he asked, Yang Lan's heart was like thunder and lightning. There was another master in his own sea of consciousness. How is this possible? He had already searched his own sea of consciousness and found nothing else that did not belong to him. How could there be we in Long Can's mouth? You will know in the future. Long Can didn't seem to feel that he had said something wrong and didn't give Yang Lan an answer. He intended to make him panic to the end. He just asked, You answer my question first. Yes. Yang Lan calmed down in an instant. Long Can's words did not rule out that it was a trick to deliberately cause psychological pressure on himself, and he couldn't believe it completely. He had to deal with the current situation first. I found the relevant records in the Zhao family's secret vault. As soon as these words came out, Long Can suddenly quieted down, not knowing what he was thinking. Yang Lan also knew that the opportunity in front of him was rare. Bing did not give Long Can too much time to think and directly threatened him. I'm afraid that for a long time, you still have to be controlled by me. Yang Lan finally expressed his pride. If you don't want to die, if I want you to go east, you have to go east. If I want you to go west, you have to go west. If I want you to beat the dog, you can't catch the chicken. Chapter 24:31. On Long Can's side, there was silence, and there was no news for a long time. It seemed that he was thinking silently. Yang Lan was not in a hurry to force Long Can to express his position, and he seemed to be very confident. Perhaps he felt that he had already grasped Long Can's lifeblood, and he was not afraid of any resistance from him. After a long time, Long Can's voice finally came through the mind, and his voice was very low. I don't believe it. Yang Chun and Yang Lan both heard Long Can's voice. It was normal to divide the sea of consciousness into 2, which was not something that anyone could do. Even the 3 Purities secret art only divided the spiritual awareness, and the divided spiritual awareness must find a carrier. For the first division, Yang Chun sent the divided spiritual awareness into the immortal body. The second primordial spirit became the spirit of the immortal beheading blade, and the third primordial spirit became the spirit of the mountain river geographical map. None of them still stayed in the deity. Even the 3 Purities secret art couldn't do it. Even if Yang Lan was a genius, how could he split another sea of consciousness? It was simply too difficult for 2 sea of consciousness to unify their thoughts. It was not that Yang Chun looked down on Yang Lan. To be honest, Yang Chun was not surprised that Yang Lan could do anything. It was just that in this matter, Yang Chun and Long can retain a cautious attitude. However, what surprised Yang Chun was that Long Qin's tone seemed to be only a little skeptical, but he still retained a skeptical tone, as if he believed it more than he didn't believe it. This was a little thought-provoking. I can prove it to you. Yang Lan seemed to have known that Long Qin would have such a reaction, and he replied calmly. Then, Yang Chun and Long Qin clearly noticed that another spiritual awareness entered this sea of consciousness from nowhere and directly collided with Long Qin's spiritual awareness imprint. Some kind of hidden and powerful enchantment on Long Qin's body was activated. In an instant, even Long Qin, a master of the Golden Immortal Peak, trembled a little. One could imagine how severe the pain was. However, the trembling was only for a moment. Long Qin seemed to bear it, and there was no more abnormal movement. How is it? Yang Lan's voice was once again transmitted through the collision of spiritual awareness, and there was a kind of proud flaunting. Be it Yang Chun or Long Qin, both of them could feel this brand new consciousness. They were all cultivators who had a deep contact with Yang Lan. Naturally, they knew very well that it was simply Yang Lan's spiritual awareness source, and no one else could impersonate it. In other words, the spiritual awareness that entered Yang Lan's current sea of consciousness from the outside was really Yang Lan himself. In other words, what Yang Lan said before was true. He really created another sea of consciousness. I'm impressed. Long Qin's words were concise and to the point. He didn't say much, but his words were clear. Yang Chun was truly impressed. Who would have thought that Yang Lan could really complete such a feat? Long Qin's admiration was audible, and Yang Chun also let out a wordless admiration. So, can you tell me who you are? Yang Lan's voice began to have a majestic tone, full of command. When he heard Long Qin blurt out the word, "we," Yang Lan was really shocked. The only two puppets he could control now were Long Qin and Yang Chun. Long Qin was no longer a puppet, but another way to control him. If the "we" in Long Qin's mouth refer to Long Qin and Yang Chun, then wouldn't Yang Chun also be uncontrollable? This was inconsistent with Yang Lan's plan to dominate the world in a low-key manner, so he had to figure out this matter. Otherwise, according to Yang Lan's suspicious character, this problem alone could make him restless. We, of course it's us. Long Qin's voice didn't have any uneasiness about being controlled, and he said it very straightforwardly and normally. With the transmission of his thoughts, another extremely strong aura appeared in Yang Lan's sea of consciousness. Yang Lan was shocked on the spot, but he immediately calmed down. He was also familiar with this aura, but he didn't know why he always subconsciously forgot this aura in his mind. Now that this aura broke out on its own, he remembered who it was. Knowing that it was this master, Yang Lan was relieved, and his heart couldn't help but feel a little proud. There were two Dragon Clan masters in the Zhao family. One was Long Qin, a wood attribute Dragon Clan master. The other was Unknown, an earth attribute Dragon Clan master. Yang Lan should have seen him before, but he didn't know why he always forgot and ignored him unconsciously. Such an unknown master was the most terrifying. Think about it. When no one could think of the appearance of a terrifying master, and this master appeared at the most intense time of the battle, what kind of terrifying situation would that be? But Yang Lan was happy. This master had appeared in the Zhao family before. Needless to say, he must also be a master controlled by the Zhao family. Since Yang Lan could find the method to control Long Qin from the Zhao family, then this Earth Attribute Dragon Clan master must also be controlled by the same method. In other words, Yang Lan could now control two Dragon Clan masters. Of course, it was a great joy, and Yang Lan couldn't help but be happy. Yang Chen also noticed this Earth Attribute Dragon Clan master in time. At this time, he also remembered that this Dragon Clan master also appeared when the Xintian sect was destroyed. Even the one who caused Zhou Sheng, a great principal golden immortal, to be seriously injured and self-destructed was this Earth Attribute master. Similar to Yang Lan's idea, this Earth Attribute Dragon Clan master's sense of existence was very weak, almost non-existent. Even Yang Chun seemed to have subconsciously forgotten the existence of this master afterwards. Just now, the master suddenly released his aura, which also shocked Yang Chun. It was not that Yang Chun was afraid of being known by Yang Lan, but that there was still a Dragon Clan master on Long Can's side. He and the girls didn't even think of it. They always thought that it was enough to contain Long Can, and almost let all the cultivators in the spiritual world fall into a situation of eternal damnation. Long Can, this guy, really hid deeply. Since there is still a Dragon Clan friend, then presumably he won't go against me. Yang Lan's proud voice came again, full of undisguised surprise. It was already a blessing to be able to control a Dragon Clan master at the peak of the Golden Immortal. Suddenly, another one jumped out for him to control. Wasn't this a great joy? If you're willing to tell me how to create another sea of consciousness, I can leave your body intact. Long Can finally sent over a thought. It was lazy, but it was not the surrender that Yang Lan expected, but a naked threat. If you don't want to, then I can only take this method out of your head personally. Although the words were soft, the fierce killing intent contained in it was not fake. Yang Lan believed that as long as he refused, Long Can would kill him without hesitation. Chapter 2432. Not to mention Yang Lan, even Yang Chun was surprised. However, after the surprise, he figured it out. With Long Can's pride and another unknown Dragon Clan master, how could he be willing to fall into Yang Lan's hands again after being controlled by the Zhao family for tens of thousands of years? If Yang Lan didn't tell Long Can that he knew how to control Long Can might let Yang Lan live for a while with the mood of watching a show. However, Yang Lan dared to use that method to threaten him. It would be strange if Long Can didn't kill him immediately. Long Can was a traitor of the Dragon Clan who could even kill at least 2 members of the same clan. Yang Lan was just like an ant. How could he care about him? As for the method that Yang Chun mastered to control Long Can, as early as when Yang Chun and Long Can were chatting before the Zhao family perished, Yang Chun knew that Long Can knew how to solve it. He just didn't show it. He used the Zhao family to complete his great feat of refining the spiritual realm. However, the Zhao family and Yang Lan really thought that they had grasped Long Can's life and wanted to use this method to control Long Can. It could only be said that they didn't understand Long Can and underestimated the Dragon Clan. Yang Lan didn't think so much. He only knew that he had used the method left by the Zhao family to control Long Can, which had aroused Long Can's fierceness. If he didn't do anything, he was afraid that he could only follow Long Can's words. After teaching Long Can a method, he would also wait for Long Can's decision. How could Yang Lan, who was still complacent a moment ago, accept such a tragic situation? Therefore, the moment Long Can's thought was sent, Yang Lan activated the Zhao family's restriction. This was a restriction set by the Zhao family specifically for Long Can and the Dragon Clan masters. As long as it was activated, it would cause unbearable pain and coma. If it wasn't for the threat of life and death, how could Long Can obediently listen to the Zhao family from the beginning? Even if Yang Lan was a beginner, it was just a control method. Did he need to study it extensively? In order to prove that he had mastered the method, he had already used it once. However, that was just to let Long Can know that he had mastered the method, so he didn't use too much force. However, at that time, Long Can also trembled. Yang Lan knew very well that this was the pain of the restriction. Since the restriction was still on Long Can, there was still a possibility for Yang Lan to turn the tables. Now, he just wanted to let Long Can know how determined he was. Fully launching the restrictions, Yang Lan did not hold back at this time. Weren't there 2 experts from the Dragon Clan? Even if one died, there would be another. Kill the disobedient ones and leave the obedient ones. Yang Lan's full activation of the restriction definitely had an impact on Long Can. Seeing that Long Can's spiritual awareness imprint was becoming more and more empty, as if it would disappear in the next moment, but no matter how Yang Lan exerted his strength, that wisp of ethereal spiritual awareness imprint was stubborn like the most difficult stain to wash. It had always existed in Yang Lan's sea of consciousness, making Yang Lan feel as uncomfortable as eating a fly. What was puzzling was that even the Earth attribute Dragon Clan expert who had just appeared had his spiritual awareness imprint weakened at the same time as Long Can's imprint. There was only a faint wisp left, but it was still tenaciously existing. Yang Chun had been watching from the sidelines. The sudden appearance of the Earth attribute Dragon Clan expert made Yang Chun a little unexpected, so he did not intend to directly expose himself. However, Yang Chun was really interested in Yang Lan's method of creating another sea of consciousness. When Yang Lan launched the restriction, Yang Chen's spiritual awareness imprint followed Yang Lan's spiritual awareness from another sea of consciousness and entered his other sea of consciousness. It could be said that Yang Lan and Long Ken were fighting, allowing Yang Chun, the fisherman, to reap the benefits. As soon as he entered Yang Lan's second sea of consciousness, Yang Chun began to search carefully. Usually, it was impossible to know the other party's memory and cultivation method, but at this time, he was using the second sea of consciousness to fight with Long Can. How could he take care of his own sea of consciousness from being invaded? However, Yang Lan was really not simple. Even in such a situation, he did not expose his cultivation method. Of course, it could not be ruled out that Yang Lan knew that Long Can and another Dragon Clan expert's spiritual awareness imprint were still in his own sea of consciousness, so he deliberately concealed the result. However, Yang Chen's spiritual awareness imprint wandered through Yang Lan's second sea of consciousness. At least he was clear about the characteristics of the second sea of consciousness. This sea of consciousness was almost exactly the same as Yang Lan's first sea of consciousness, but it was a little smaller. The origin was exactly the same, but the difference was also very big. Not to mention anything else, just from the stability of the sea of consciousness, there was a lot of difference. But the total amount of spiritual awareness was much more than that of the other side. According to the spiritual awareness cultivation of the second sea of consciousness, Yang Lan had almost reached the level of peak golden immortal spiritual awareness. No wonder he dared to pull out Long Can at that time. It turned out that he still had such a trump card. The two sea of consciousness seemed to be cultivated by two cultivators with different personalities. One paid attention to the realm of cultivation, and the other paid attention to the degree of stability. This made Yang Chun really curious about how Yang Lan did it. Despite his curiosity, Yang Chun did not do much. Anyway, Long Can must have a way to do it, as long as he stayed quietly and waited. After a meal, Yang Lan had already begun to worry, but whether it was Long Can or the unknown Dragon Clan expert, their spiritual awareness imprint was not weaker, but slowly began to recover. At this point, how could Yang Lan not know that his perfect plan had been ruined? However, he was not a person who was waiting to die, and immediately began to use the means of the Great Devil Heart Sutra. Anyway, his own spiritual awareness imprint was still in Long Can's sea of consciousness. As long as his cultivation was higher than Long Can, he could also forcibly control it. Unfortunately, the saying, "the heart is higher than the sky, the life is thinner than paper," was used by Yang Lan. No matter how he urged his own spiritual awareness imprint, the imprint that he had tried in the past seemed to be bound by a powerful cage at this moment, and he could not move at all. "It seems that you still haven't given up." Long Can's words sounded in Yang Lan's first sea of consciousness, causing the entire sea of consciousness to tremble. But at this moment, Yang Lan no longer had the wisdom he had before. His whole person was like a pitiful person who was forced to a dead end, trembling like a frightened quail. This despair of not being able to escape and not being able to fight made him completely feel the taste of death. "I only want your cultivation method, and then I will give you a quick death." Long Can's spiritual awareness imprint began to skyrocket wildly, and the spiritual awareness imprint of the other Dragon Clan expert also skyrocketed. It swept in scrupulously in Yang Lan's sea of consciousness, and even followed the path that Yang Chun had just passed through to another sea of consciousness. "Since you don't know how to appreciate favors," Long Can's cold voice said mercilessly, "then don't blame me for being impolite." Chapter 2433. Yang Lan didn't know what was going on. and he didn't know what Long Can and the Dragon Clan Master were going to do, but Yang Chun, who was following closely, saw it clearly. The owner of the Sea of Consciousness, Yang Lan, was already powerless to howl. It was a very painful thing for the Sea of Consciousness to be broken all of a sudden, but after all, it was only for a while, and it would pass immediately. But now his Sea of Consciousness was being smashed bit by the two Dragon Clan Masters. This pain was even more painful than being cut alive inch by inch, but he couldn't do anything. He couldn't resist, he couldn't escape, he could only bear it. He couldn't live, and he couldn't die. Aren't the puppets you used to control like this? A voice that Yang Lan never dared to think about rang in Yang Lan's ears. But Yang Lan couldn't find the owner of the voice anyway. Soon, Yang Lan understood that this voice was actually ringing in his Sea of Consciousness. It was rotating, and at the same time, two intertwined spiral spiritual awareness imprints rushed into Yang Lan's life source flying sword, wantonly destroying it. After a while, the life source flying sword, which had been nourished and refined by Yang Lan for thousands of years, seemed to be smashed by Yang Lan's spiritual awareness. It buzzed and trembled. When the two spiritual awareness rushed out of the flying sword flew out of the Sea of Consciousness uncontrollably, and no one knew where it flew to. This was Yang Lan's life source flying sword, which could be said to be a magic weapon connected to his life. According to reason, this kind of life source magic weapon should leave the Sea of Consciousness in the first place. But now it didn't even have a chance to move, and it was directly attacked by the two spiritual awareness. Long Can was using this method to force Yang Lan to find Yang Lan's cultivation method, and the price was that Yang Lan's entire Sea of Consciousness was broken. Two consecutive life source flying sword were released, and the cultivation that he worked hard to cultivate became a bubble. This kind of blow was even worse than death. Interesting, it's really interesting. The spiritual awareness imprints of the two Dragon Clan Masters crushed Yang Chen's spiritual awareness, while Long Can also issued an evaluation. This evaluation could be heard by Yang Chun, and he believed that Yang Chun could hear it even more. What was even more terrifying was that Long Can and the other Dragon Clan experts' divine sense imprints started to revolve. Then, the two divine sense imprints once again advanced in a spiral shape. Wherever they passed, everything in front of them would be smashed into powder. Yang Lan's spiritual awareness threads easily wrapped around the spiritual awareness imprints of Long Can and the Dragon Clan expert, and the two guys ran amok in Yang Lan's Sea of Consciousness. However, Yang Chen also discovered some clues. It seemed that Long Can and the Dragon Race expert had a secret technique that allowed them to retrieve some memories from the shattered divine senses. No wonder Long Can had said that he would take it himself. So this was the method. Just by looking at how Yang Lan couldn't do anything and could only scream, it could be seen that this was a cruel punishment. It also showed that Long Can's technique was very fierce. There must be a reason for doing this. Boom! A huge sound wave rolled in Yang Lan's Sea of Consciousness. The two spiritual awareness imprints heavily hit a strangely shaped flying sword, causing Yang Lan to once again scream like a pig being slaughtered. Until the Sea of Consciousness where they lived was almost broken, the two spiritual awareness imprints fiercely followed the spiritual awareness that Yang Lan had just tried to launch the restriction and entered the second Sea of Consciousness. It was still in accordance with the law. Looking at the Sea of Consciousness that the two Dragon Clan experts were crazily destroying other people's Sea of Consciousness, Yang Chun put himself in their shoes. Then he calmly put down his heart and followed the spiritual awareness imprints of the two Dragon Clan experts to watch the show. Yang Chen's Sea of Consciousness. If he didn't take the initiative, no outsider could enter. Even if there was a spiritual awareness that went in, it would definitely enter a virtual Sea of Consciousness and be deceived. Even if there was a strong and ferocious guy like Long Can who rushed into the real Sea of Consciousness, when he faced the soaring Heaven King Palace, he would definitely cry in despair. In terms of the condensation and stability of the Sea of Consciousness, if Long Can's spiritual awareness imprint was a reinforced concrete building, Then Yang Chen's soaring Heaven King Palace must be a perfect diamond with Mo's hardness 10. When Longkin said that he was impolite, he wasn't just saying it. He was really impolite. It wasn't just Longkin. There was another Earth attribute Dragon Clan expert whose behavior was almost exactly the same as Longkin. He was indeed impolite, and it wasn't just ordinary impoliteness. The two spiritual awareness imprints seemed to have become the owners of Yanglan's Sea of Consciousness, directly rampaging in Yanglan's Sea of Consciousness. Although Yanglan's Sea of Consciousness was at the late Golden Immortal stage and the peak Golden Immortal stage, in front of the two unreasonable spiritual awareness imprints of the peak Golden Immortal stage, the difference was simply not a little bit. Unsurprisingly, in Yanglan's new Sea of Consciousness, he refined another natal flying sword. It had to be said that Yanglan, this guy, was very scheming and shrewd. He had prepared a way out. Unfortunately, he was too arrogant. At the inappropriate time, he let two inappropriate spiritual awareness imprints enter his Sea of Consciousness. This was the price of his arrogance. The two spiritual awareness imprints didn't smash Yanglan's Sea of Consciousness at all. Instead, they swallowed Yanglan's spiritual awareness by entangling with each other. He didn't know what method was used to grind it, but it wasn't what it looked like at all. Before this, apart from some hypnotic techniques, Yang Chun had never seen an expert who could directly search the memories of others' Sea of Consciousness. Long can actually have such an overbearing technique. Just thinking about it was frightening. Perhaps this was some kind of secret technique of the Dragon Clan. This time, he might have to ask Roaring Heaven. The two spiritual awareness imprints destroyed Yanglan's Sea of Consciousness crazily, destroying everything they touched and smashing it into powder. At this moment, Yanglan could only make a scream of extreme pain. His whole body was trembling in pain, but he couldn't do anything else. Unlike Yang Chen's spiritual awareness threads that wandered in Yanglan's Sea of Consciousness like the smallest mosquitoes, the spiritual awareness imprints of the two Dragon Clan masters were simply crushing him. Yanglan had a little resistance at first, but after a few hits, his spiritual awareness collided with it, like an egg hitting a stone. Don't look at how there were thousands of eggs. No matter how many eggs hit the stone, so what? Wasn't it still turned into a pile of broken eggs? The former Sea of Consciousness had been stirred into a puddle, and there was nothing complete. It could be said that the Sea of Consciousness had been completely destroyed. The situation at the moment was like this. Yang Chun had long known that this would be the result. Although Yanglan's spiritual awareness cultivation base was high, compared with Longkin, an old guy who had condensed his Sea of Consciousness for tens of thousands of years, the difference was not a little bit. In terms of stability, if Longkin's Sea of Consciousness was a reinforced concrete building, then Yanglan was at most a thatched house that would be blown away by the wind. There was no comparison at all. Chapter 2434. Yang Chun, how is it possible? Yanglan could never believe that the owner of this voice would talk to him in this way, in this situation. In his imagination, Yang Chun should be a puppet that he had already controlled, a target for him to slaughter. How could he appear in his own Sea of Consciousness? Oh, yes, I forgot to tell you that we're not just the two of us. There's also Yang Chun. Longkin did not forget to talk to Yanglan while frantically looking for Yanglan's cultivation method, because Yang Chen's voice was actually talking to Yang Shilong at the same time. Longkin had always been very afraid of Yang Chun, because until now he had not found Yang Chen's spiritual awareness imprint. Since the contact, Yang Chun had always been active. No matter what method Longkin used, he could not find a trace of Yang Chen's spiritual awareness imprint. Even if Longkin had just smashed Yanglan's other Sea of Consciousness inch by inch, he did not find Yang Chen's trace. Yang Chen's absence was always a threat to Longkin, so he did not hesitate to show his trump card and bring his companion, the Earth Attribute Dragon Clan Master, in order to form pressure on Yang Chen. At the same time, the cooperation of the two masters could be more effective in the search. Unfortunately, until he destroyed Yanglan's second flying sword, Yang Chun did not show any clues. This made Longkin anxious, but he also wanted to find Yanglan's cultivation method quickly. Others were not clear, But Long Kin knew very well that the method of the second sea of consciousness that Yang Lan had comprehended was simply a tailor-made, suitable cultivation method for him. With this method, his cultivation could go to a higher level and even break through the peak of Golden Immortal, so he could not allow anyone to destroy it. Yang Chun, who he had never been able to find, was like an assassin hiding in the shadows, which made Long Kin restless. Although there was no substantial contact between the two sides, Long Kin knew very well that his enemy had never been the Zhao family, Yang Lan, or any spiritual realm master, but Yang Chun. This was a kind of fate that was predestined. Long Kin believed in this. However, he still had a deep fear of this opponent that he couldn't find. He was afraid that Yang Chun would ruin his plans at this time. By the way, last time you promised to inform me when you want Yang Shi's life. Yang Chen's voice was as calm as ever. In the ears of Long Kin Yang Lan and another Dragon Clan master, you broke your promise. I'm sorry. Long Kin admitted and apologized directly. Luckily, you made it in time. Nice to meet you, senior. How should I address you? Yang Chen wasn't here to denounce him. Even if he did, it would be meaningless. He just wanted to show off his presence. At the same time, he wanted to know the identity of the Earth attribute dragon. Long K. Surprisingly, it was not Long K who answered, but Long Can. It seemed that from the beginning, Long K had never spoken. He just released his momentum to let Yang Lan and Yang Chun know that there was such a master. It was only Long Can who spoke. Long Can, Long Quebec. Yang Chun chewed these two names and couldn't help but smile. The names of the two seniors are really unique. In Yang Lan's Sea of Consciousness, Yang Chun and Long Can and Long K talked unscrupulously. Even Yang Lan himself could hear them, but he could only listen and could not do anything. It was also because Yang Chun opened his mouth that the movements of Long Can and Long K slowed down, giving Yang Lan a little breathing space. At this time, Yang Lan carefully pondered over Yang Chen's words. It turned out that being controlled was such a painful taste. Unfortunately, Yang Lan was too selfish. He would never reflect on himself just because he tasted it. He just regretted that he exposed himself too early. Otherwise, if he dragged on for a while, he might be able to turn defeat into victory. There is no need to get lucky. Yang Chen's voice sounded very gentle. This was obviously said to Yang Lan. Even if I give you another 10,000 years, you will not be Senior Long Can's opponent. This guy was simply stubborn. Yang Chun did not expect this guy to be thinking about this. He was really hopeless. By the way, the two seniors can continue looking for whatever you need to look for. Yang Chen reminded Long Can and Long Quebec. He continued to watch the show. Don't worry about me. I am just watching. You are not going to cause trouble? Long Can was a little surprised. Was Yang Chun just going to watch? Why should I cause trouble? Your opponent is not me. Yang Chun smiled and said, Big Sister Ao Lan, Long Quang, and the others have been waiting to meet you. I am also waiting for them. Long Can clearly remembered Ao Lan and Long Quang. When the Xintian sect was destroyed, Ao Lan and Long Quang had appeared. Long Can would never forget their familiar auras. Even when he was trapped in the Zhao clan, he could not separate himself from Ao Lan and Long Quang. At this time, there seemed to be a different kind of emotion. Yang Chen stood by and watched. Yang Lan's pain began again. The feeling of devouring the sea of consciousness inch by inch was comparable to smashing the bones in his body inch by inch, and then curing them before smashing them again made Yang Lan almost collapse. He wanted to faint, but he was unable to do so. He could only bear all of this with a clear mind. It seemed that he knew that he would not be lucky this time. Yang Lan's mind would involuntarily appear bits and pieces of this life. He was high-spirited when he first joined the Taishaman, the lofty sentiments when he first started cultivating, and so on. However, what did he start to hate Yang Chun? Why was it? Yes, it was because Yang Chen's performance was better than his. It was because of this. How could a tenant's son who joined an unranked sect be better than the young master of a famous sect? To put it bluntly, it was because of jealousy. For a jealous thought, he lost his sister and himself. Because of this, more than 10 million cultivators were implicated. Was all of this worth it? Yang Chun was really watching from the sidelines. He He even deliberately released some aura to let Long Can and Long K know where he was so that they could continue boldly. Long Can and Long K cared so much about Yanglan's cultivation technique that it would definitely be of great use to them. However, Yang Chun did not care. Yang Chun was more interested in Yanglan than Long Can and Long Quebec. As for whether Long Can and Long K's cultivation would improve because of Yanglan's cultivation technique, Yang Chun did not care. After witnessing the complete madness of Yanglan's control of the Zhao family, Yang Chun had another kind of insight. He had to say that sometimes Yang Chun even had to thank Yanglan. Found it. Long Can's surprised voice could be heard. Even Long K's aura became turbulent. Soon, they verified the authenticity of the cultivation technique and confirmed that they had really found their target. Chapter 2435. Since the two seniors have found what you want, then this younger generation junior will overstep his boundaries. Yang Chen's voice came at the right time, and it was still calm. Yang Lan and this younger generation junior have an old relationship. His last journey will be sent by this younger generation junior. Thank you. After getting what they wanted, Long Can and Long K naturally had no intention of keeping Yang Lan. When Yang Chun said this, he just agreed to push the boat with the current. It could also be considered as a repayment for Yang Chen's favor of not attacking them when they were not paying attention. Yang Lan, every grievance has a head, and every debt has a debtor. I will accept your cause and effect. Yang Chen no longer paid attention to Long Can and Long K, and directly said the famous mantra to Yang Lan, "Let's go." Wait. Yang Lan certainly knew the meaning of Yang Chen's words. He was about to say something, but he only had time to say 2 words, and he was drowned by a raging spiritual awareness. At the moment when Yang Lan spoke, Yang Lan's sea of consciousness was suddenly filled with Yang Chen's spiritual awareness. It was gurgling and dense. It was not as overbearing as Long Can and Long K, but it was more condensed. In a flash, Yang Lan's sea of consciousness was almost filled. This was not all. Yang Chen's spiritual awareness was still increasing wildly, and Yang Lan's sea of consciousness was shaky. Long Can and Long K faced Yang Chen's gentle and overbearing spiritual awareness at this moment, but they did not resist at all. However, they also tried a little. Unfortunately, their spiritual awareness imprints in Yang Lan's sea of consciousness were all slowly bounced back after hitting Yang Chen's spiritual awareness. There was no harm, and it did not let their spiritual awareness wander. It was as if they were gently persuaded to curl up in a corner of Yang Lan's sea of consciousness. The 2 Dragon Clan masters did not feel very strong, but Yang Lan, as the master, was different. Yang Chen's incomparably abundant spiritual awareness filled his sea of consciousness. What it brought to him was not elastic and harmless like Long Can and Long K, but the most terrifying and painful torture. Imagine the scene of his brain constantly being stuffed with things and then exploding alive. This was how Yang Lan felt at the moment. He felt as if his head was a balloon that was being inflated crazily. But his head wasn't that big, and the feeling of it being forcibly enlarged was more painful than having a blunt knife cutting his flesh. But Yang Lan couldn't do anything now. His 2 seas of consciousness had been almost destroyed by Long Can and Long Quebec. Even if Yang Chun didn't make a move in the end, he was already a waste. The fact that Long Can and Long K were still able to retain a sliver of his consciousness was already a show of mercy by Long Can and Long K. But Yang Chun didn't want to give him any more chances. Now Yang Chun only wanted one thing. That was Yang Lan's death. Even if Long Can and Long K were make a move, Yang Chun was a little worried. He had to do it himself. From a mortal world to the spiritual world, Yang Lan was like an unkillable cockroach. No matter what disaster he encountered, he could live in the humble crevice with ease. After gaining power, he could give unparalleled cruel revenge to the guys who hurt him. Such a guy, Yang Chen would never allow him to have a chance to make a comeback. Yang Lan had been so full that he couldn't speak. His eyes also protruded out, and his tongue stuck out uncontrollably. It was also a scene of blowing a balloon. The strong pressure in his sea of consciousness made his whole head swollen. He wanted to say something, but he couldn't say a word. It turned out that a lifetime of conspiracy would end like this. After the last few words flashed in Yanglan's mind, his head suddenly exploded. The headless corpse lay quietly somewhere in the demon realm. Maybe Long Can and Long K would deal with it in the future. Maybe they wouldn't. Maybe Gong Sunling would refine it one day, maybe not. This was no longer important. No matter how many great things you did when you were alive, once you died, it was only 3 feet of land. Yang Lan didn't even have this extravagant hope. Who knew if Long Can and Long K would fight against Gong Sunling? Would those uncontrollable monsters swallow his corpse? The corpse of a Xian immortal level cultivator also had an extraordinary attraction for monsters. Once Yang Lan died, his sea of consciousness no longer existed. Yang Chen's spiritual imprint also directly returned to Yang Chen's body. Similarly, Long Can and Long K's spiritual imprint would also return. In the near future, perhaps after Long Can and Long K comprehended and cultivated Yang Lan's cultivation technique, they would have a final competition with Gong Sunling, or they would settle their previous hatred with A.O. Lan, Long Quang, and the experts of the dragon race. When Long Can and Long K were searching for Yang Lan's cultivation technique, Yang Chun didn't stop them. It wasn't that he didn't put Long Can and Long K in his eyes. On the contrary, Yang Chun hoped that they could cultivate to their strongest state and then fight with him. Yang Lan killed millions of people. To be honest, compared to Yang Chun, he didn't know how many times he was cruel and merciless. The spiritual world, the Zhao family, and Yang Lan's fight all the way to the present had indeed given Yang Chun a lot of insights. Yang Chun suddenly discovered that in the face of some absolute power, any conspiracy and tricks were floating clouds. The Zhao family spent tens of thousands of years to arrange it, but it was just a thought of ancestor Lu tens of thousands of years ago. The heaven and earth chessboard, the cultivator's chess piece, turning the hand over the cloud and covering the hand over the rain. What kind of spirit? Yang Chun couldn't help but have the urge to learn from ancestor Lu. For example, brotherly Chung, no matter how strong your enemy is, no matter how your conspiracy is arranged, they will always wait for you to attack, give you enough time to brew, and then crush you when you are the most proud. Even the thought of resistance can't be raised. To reach that level, first of all, one must not be afraid to face any strong enemy. Long Can and Long K, let them grow to the strongest state, and also a whetstone for Yang Chun. Yang Chun wanted to sharpen his own cultivation base in the spiritual world to the extreme on Long Can and Long Quebec. Big Brother, Yang Lan created a kind of spiritual awareness cultivation method. Yang Chun hasn't figured out what Yang Lan's situation is for the time being. So when he saw Yang Lan, the first thing he did was to ask brotherly Chung. Yang Chen's description of Yang Lan's situation at the time was very detailed and thorough, and even the changes and differences in Yang Lan's sea of consciousness were said. Yang Chen's words attracted the women's amazement. It was really rare for a guy like Yang Lan to have such qualifications and understanding. 2 sea of consciousness, and there are still different sea of consciousness. Li Chung listened to Yang Chen's description, and after thinking for a long time, he slowly said, "If I'm not wrong, Yang Lan is definitely not 1 personality, but 2. In the midst of everyone's doubts, brotherly Chung began to solve the doubts. There is such a kind of person in this world. Their personality will split, and they will form 2 completely different personalities in one body. Only in this way can they control 1 sea of consciousness separately. Otherwise, if the sea of consciousness is split without a carrier, they will die." Chapter 2436. Then why must Long Can and Long K find such a cultivation technique? Yang Chun did not understand this problem. However, Yang Chun and the others did not understand. They could only wait for big sister A.O. Lan and Long Quang to return. Some fellows just could not bear the nagging. While Yang Chun and the others were thinking that A.O. Lan and Long Quang had already left for a period of time, Gong Sunling told everyone that big sister A.O. Lan and the others had returned. When they were dealing with Yang Lan, Gong Sunling and Long Can did not launch any attacks. Both sides tacitly held back and guarded against each other. This was also Yang Qin's intention. Otherwise, Long Can might not have the strength to stir up trouble in Yang Qin's sea of consciousness. The moment Big Sister Ao Lan and the 7 Long clan experts entered the Mountain River geographical map, they were sent to Yang Qin by Gong Sunling. This time, Big Sister Ao Lan and Long Quang brought back the 6 experts with the surname Long that Yang Qin's family met previously. They were the ones who helped Yang Qin refine the Dragon Palace. Speak of the devil. Yang Qin did not bother to exchange pleasantries with them. He directly told them about Long Can and Long K, causing Big Sister Ao Lan to be shocked. There is another Dragon Clan expert called Long K. Big Sister Ao Lan reacted as though she had never heard of Long K before. The Long Clan experts were all like this. They all knew about Long Can, but no one knew about Long Quebec. You should have met him previously. Yang Qin was very clear that Big Sister Ao Lan and Long Quang should be the same as him. They had inexplicably forgotten about the Earth-attributed Dragon Clan Master. One must know that the last time the Profound Heaven Sect was destroyed, Ao Lan and Long Quang also took action. They had also seen the situation of Long K seriously injuring Zhou Sheng, the one who seriously injured Zhou Sheng. Big Sister Ao Lan and Long Quang only remembered after Yang Qin reminded them. It wasn't just them. Ao Lai and Lin Jingyuan, who were present at that time, also thought about it. They suddenly realized that everyone had subconsciously forgotten about Long Quebec. Only then did they realize how powerful this guy was. If it was just a dragon race trader, Big Sister Ao Lan and the 7 Long clan experts would definitely not lose. However, the sudden appearance of Long K was a different matter. Especially when this guy had such an inexplicable technique, it was even more of a headache. Think about it. No one would think of a certain guy during a battle, but he suddenly appeared out of nowhere and launched an attack. Who could withstand that? By the way, does the Dragon Clan possess a secret technique that allows them to enter the sea of wisdom of other cultivators to forcibly extract their memories? Yang Qin recalled the question he had asked back then. Thus, he took the opportunity to ask. Originally, Xiao Qian wanted to ask Xiao Tian. However, since Big Sister Ao Lan was here, he could let her explain. The dragon race has this kind of secret technique. As expected, Big Sister Ao Lan immediately admitted that there was such a method. However, she quickly explained, however, this method is a little outrageous. Unless it is an evil person, the dragon race would not casually use it. Based on this restriction, Yang Lan was definitely an evil person. Long Can and Long K did not break their precepts when using it. Furthermore, not to mention not breaking their precepts, Long Can was a traitor of the dragon race. He even killed his own kind. Such a small matter like breaking his precepts was not worth mentioning. Why would Long Can and Long K need such a method? Yang Qin wanted to know the reason. Actually, he wanted to know why Long Can became a traitor of the dragon race. Long Can was born as a cripple. At this point, Big Sister Ao Lan felt that there was no need to hide it. After all, she was going to meet Long Can soon. There was no point in hiding it. So, she said it directly, perhaps it is not a cripple, but a deformity. Humans often had deformed babies. This was related to many factors during pregnancy. Some were also related to both parents, so it was not strange. Actually, it was not only humans. Basically, every race would have such a deformed fetus. Therefore, it was not rare for the dragon race to have a deformed fetus. He has 2 heads. Long Quang continued from where elder sister Ao Lan left off. Some things were not good for a lady to say. So Long Quang thoughtfully helped his girlfriend to say the rest. One is alive, and the other is dead. There was a senior who used great magic to hide that dead dragon head of his, making him look like an ordinary one. It's just that, you know what happened. His original name is not Long Can. He changed his name later on. Long Quang had been performing well recently. Not only was he not arrogant anymore, he was also taking good care of his girlfriend. It looked like this extremely arrogant fellow needed a solid lesson. After letting him know how high the heavens were and how deep the earth was, he would understand that not everyone revolved around him. Long Quan's performance was very good. At the very least, it showed that the beating he received was not in vain. A naturally deformed fellow would be discriminated against and ridiculed by some of his ignorant fellow race. This was simply a matter of course. Even if there were experts who made him look like a normal dragon, there would definitely be people who didn't have eyes to be rude. Then, it was very likely that Long Qin would kill his own race and become a traitor to the dragon race. There were too many such things among mortals. Yang Chen did not even need to ask. This must be the case. In fact, Long Quan's, had already explained a lot of problems. The words of the two also gave Yang Chen a general understanding. Long Qin was deformed. He had two heads. Although one head was alive and the other was dead, who knew if Long Qin had any way to bring the dead back to life? Maybe that Long Ke was the one that everyone had always thought was dead. In this case, everyone could understand why Long Qin needed Yang Lan's cultivation technique. Big Brother Li Cheng had analyzed that Yang Lan might have schizophrenia. Long Qin and Long Ke were clearly two living people. However, they shared the same body with different heads. It could be said that they completely met the requirements of Yang Lan's cultivation technique. They could perfectly merge Long Qin and Long Ke into one. A two-headed dragon was truly unimaginable. If Ao Lan and the others had not said it, no one would have guessed it. Although this was just Yang Chen's guess, it was the most accurate guess at the moment. Based on the expressions of Ao Lan and the others, it seemed like they were thinking the same thing. Ao Lan did not feel that there was any problem with Yang Chen letting Long Qin and Long Ke find Yang Lan's cultivation technique. Even though they had been trying to kill the dragon race traitor Long Qin for so many years, Yang Chen could tell that they were feeling guilty. That was to say, Long Qin had suffered a lot of grievances back then. Big sister, what do you plan to do? Yang Chen would not pursue what happened in the past. Right now, he was standing with Ao Lan. He would not think about anything else. He only asked, should we challenge him to a one-on-one fight, or should we gang up on him? Chapter 2437. Regardless of whether Ao Lan and the others chose a one-on-one fight or a group fight, Yang Chen would definitely support them unconditionally. After all, this was an internal matter of the dragon race. Yang Chen would only make a move if Ao Lan and the others were at a disadvantage and their lives were in danger. Of course, Xiao Chan was making a move because they were friends. Do Long Qin and Long Ke have the dragon soul incense? Before preparing for the final battle, Yang Chen still had to ask this question first. Different answers would have different ways of dealing with it. The dragon soul incense was different from the divine perching jade. Overall, the dragon soul incense was much better than the divine perching jade. At the very least, cultivators who were resurrected using the dragon soul incense would be able to immediately recover the cultivation they had when their primordial spirit was planted. There was no need for a long recovery period. Furthermore, the dragon soul incense had another special characteristic. It was almost impossible to track the planted dragon soul incense. If Long Qin and Long Ke had the dragon soul incense, even if they died, it would not be easy to find the place where they resurrected. However, the divine perching jade was different. The other cultivators in the spiritual realm might not be clear about the true use of the divine perching jade. However, Yang Chen, who had the memories of his previous life, understood it very well. He could easily find the hiding place of the people who used the divine perching jade. Of course, the premise was that his spiritual sense imprint had to track the whereabouts of the other party's spiritual sense the moment they died. Why did Yang Chen insist on doing it himself when Yang Lan died? This was also because he wanted to check if Yang Lan used the divine perching jade. Yang Chen did not want to see Yang Lan for even a moment. Hence, he would not give Yang Lan a chance to resurrect with the divine perching jade. The pitiful Yang Lan did not know about the hidden inside story and died with hatred. Furthermore, Yang Chen could confirm that Yang Lan did not have a chance to obtain the divine perching jade. That was to say, Yang Lan was already dead and could not be resurrected. Yang Lan once controlled tens of thousands of puppets and decided the life and death of millions of cultivators. However, because he was sealed in the fiend realm early on, he did not even obtain a piece of the divine perching jade. Even after Yang Lan controlled Yang Chun, he was afraid of being discovered by Yang Chun. He did not let him take out any divine perching jade. He was overly cautious and cut off all his chances of survival. Of course, this was also because Yang Chun had strict control from the start, not giving Lan a chance to Yang Lan. Since the beginning of monitoring Yang Lan, Yang Chun has paid great attention to this aspect and did not let Yang Lan succeed. The dragon's soul fragrance in the Violent Dragon Palace is the most valuable treasure of my royal family. At this time, Ao Lan seemed to remember that there was still the matter of the dragon's soul fragrance. She glared at Yang Chun fiercely before saying, "The entire clan is only left with that little. In the end, it all benefited you." Long one. This was the Dragon clan of Shaolan's eyes. Shao one. Dragon Ao clans Dong, Lan of 1-1. 1-1 Dragon 1-1. Tian, Yanglan's Chun, 1-1-1 with Dragon, Chun Shinyang clan, 1-1. Ao that. Hearing this answer, Yang Chun heaved a sigh of relief. Without the dragon soul fragrance, Long Can and Long K would not come back to life. This way, many of the threats would be minimized. In layman's terms, they only had one life. Killing them once was enough. There was no need to waste too much effort. If it were those who used the divine perching jade or the dragon soul fragrance, they would have to kill them twice. Right now, Long Can and Long K could not care about fighting. Instead, they were cultivating Yang Lan's self-created cultivation technique, trying to form two seas of consciousness. Yang Chun told Big Sis Ao Lan and the others about these things, letting them make preparations. Otherwise, they might end up dying here. Right now, Long Can and Long K were in the territory controlled by Long Can of the Fiend Realm. In order to prevent Long Can and Long K from using the power of the Fiend Realm to suppress Long Can and Long K, Gong Sunling and Long K's third primordial spirit would increase the rate at which they refined the other party's space, ensuring that Long Can and Long K could not free themselves. In this aspect, Long Can and Long K definitely made a bad move. Long Can originally thought that with his strong cultivation, even if Gong Sunling could refine the demonic realm, she would not be able to contend with him, a peak golden immortal. Hence, he used a powerful formation and paid a huge price to connect the two spaces. Previously, he wanted to refine the Mountain River geographical map so that Gong Sunling could not escape. Now, he threw himself into it. With the two spaces connected, Long Can and Long K could not separate themselves. They were firmly restrained by Gong Sunling. If he had not been so greedy and wanted the Mountain River geographical map, Long Can and Long K could have gone to the Immortal realm with half the Fiend realm and half the Fiend realm after the Zhao clan was destroyed and Yang Lan died. At that time, the sea would be wide and the sky would be high. A free and unfettered life would not be a dream. Unfortunately, with one wrong thought, it turned into such a situation. He could not advance or retreat. Long Can and Long K probably regretted this. However, there was no medicine for regret in this world. They could only silently accept this fact. However, the Mountain River geographical map was a supreme treasure in the dragon race's treasure trove. It was natural for the dragon race experts to be interested in it. It was not surprising that Long Can and Long K were interested in it. Given how horrifying Yang Chun was in Yang Lan's sea of consciousness, Long Can and Long K would probably have to improve their strength before they were confident. This was also one of the reasons why Long Can and Long K had to obtain Yang Lan's cultivation technique. Right now, these two fellows were definitely racing against time to cultivate Yang Lan's cultivation technique. For the sake of Ao Lan and the others, Yang Chun had to set up some obstacles for Long Can and Long K, preventing them from completely freeing up their hands. While Yang Chun was confident of dealing with Long Can and Long K at their peak, the same might not be true for Ao Lan and the others. However, Xiao Chun could not say this out loud. If he did, Ao Lan and the Long clan would probably fly into a rage out of humiliation. Even if it was for the sake of face, they would definitely tell Yang Chun not to meddle in other people's business. However, Yang Chun could not just watch them fight head-on with Long Can and Long K, who had Yang Lan's cultivation technique. Hence, he was very careful. As for Ao Lai, he would definitely be following Yang Chun for the time being. Given his cultivation, he would not be able to face Long Can and Long K directly. Instead, he would be carefree and happy. This was what Ao Lan hoped to see. She was also willing to see a royal descendant of the dragon race living happily without any worries. Fortunately, Ao Lan and the others did not see through Yang Chen's painstaking arrangements at the start. At the very least, they managed to delay it for several dozen days. In the past few days, Ao Lan and Long Quang had been studying how to deal with Long Can and Long Quebec originally. They thought that there was only one enemy, Long Can. Now that there was Long K, naturally, they had to change their plans. At the same time, they had to obtain more information from Yang Chun. When Yang Chun told Ao Lan and the others about the cultivation technique that Long Can and Long K had created, Ao Lan basically understood Yang Chen's intentions. Chapter 2438. Ao Lan was grateful for Yang Chen's kind intentions. However, the dragon race had their own pride. They could not possibly ask for help from a friend on such a matter. It was best for the dragon race's traitor to be dealt with by the dragon race. If Ao Lan asked Yang Chun to remove the seal on the refinement, it would hurt Yang Chen's good intentions. Ao Lan was very concerned about the ways of the world. How could she make such a low-level mistake? If she rejected a friend's kind intentions, she would offend them. Princess Ao Lan would not do such a foolish thing. But soon Ao Lan was no longer worried about this matter, because someone made such a request for her, so that Gong Sun Ling would temporarily slow down the refining of the other party's space, and so that Ao Lan would not face the trouble of directly rejecting Yang Chun. The one who made such a request was a portion of the upper echelon of the Allied command. The reason why it was only a portion was that the core of the upper echelon of the Dao sect was not willing. However, not every upper echelon of the sect could be like the Island Lord when faced with a peak golden immortal dragon expert who had refined 60% of the demon realm and had yet to show any hostility. In reality, the ones who made the request this time were the Ghost Sect and Ghost Sect. Their golden immortal grandmaster was still imprisoned by Yang Chun as a lesson. It was not time to release him yet. However, the Zhao clan had already been exterminated. These sect wanted their golden immortal grandmaster to regain his freedom without any special reason. They could only target the dragon race expert. It was not that they did not want to force Yang Chun. It was because Yang Chun had relied on his own cultivation to win against 6 of them. No matter how powerful they could not be more powerful than 6 golden immortal experts. Now that they had just dealt with the Zhao clan, the Allied command would not allow the alliance to kill each other in such a short time. Furthermore, the temptation of the dragon race expert was too great. It was normal for these sect members to be tempted. Actually, it was not just those 6 sect members. The other sect members whose golden immortal grandmasters were killed by the Zhao clan were also tempted. The reason why they did not have much say in the Allied command and were marginalized was because they did not have a peak expert to back them up. At this time, a peak golden immortal expert who didn't show any hostility and was likely to be won over was definitely tempting. In particular, this expert was from the Dragon Clan and had more than half of the demon realm in his hands. If they did not fight for it, who knew how many sect masters would not be satisfied? Even the 4 sects of the Dao sects were tempted. However, they were clear that they could not take out a trump card that could tempt the other party, so they could resist the temptation. This was also thanks to the Dao sect's refined state of mind. Compared to the demon race and demon sect, it was indeed more stable. Although the sect members were tempted, they weren't confident. But if there were dates and there were no dates, there was nothing to lose. Anyway, Longkin didn't show any hostility, right? At this time, everyone was already focused on annihilating the Zhao clan. Longkin didn't take the opportunity to kill all the cultivators in the spiritual realm. It seemed to indicate that Long Kin had always been controlled by the Zhao clan and was only freed after the Zhao clan was annihilated. Everyone had forgotten that it was because of Gong Sunling that Long Kin didn't dare to act rashly. Some people thought of this, but one was at the peak of the Golden Immortal, while the other was only at the peak of the Mystic Immortal. There was a whole realm difference between them, and they were evenly matched. Were they sure that this wasn't a joke? It wasn't that they were looking down on Gong Sunling, but the fact that there was a big realm difference between them could only mean one thing. Long Kin must have held back. All the common knowledge of cultivators told them that it was possible to fight someone at a lower realm in the mortal world. After all, their realms were low and the difference wasn't huge. However, when it came to the difference between a mystic immortal and a golden immortal, it could be described as a world of difference. Otherwise, there wouldn't be a golden immortal expert from each sect that could intimidate everyone in the world. No one could believe that Yang Chen's family could be so heaven-defying. Therefore, most people chose to believe that Long Kin had good intentions towards the spiritual realm. With this thought in mind, all the cultivators chose to forget about Long Kin's attempt to refine the spiritual realm or blame the Zhao clan for it. Everyone would rather believe that Long Kin was forced to do it and that he had good intentions. Therefore, a few higher-ups of the sect came to discuss with Yang Chen about giving up on refining the spiritual realm and showing goodwill to the Zhao clan. Of course, these people who came to discuss were very determined that this was only temporary. If Long Kin didn't know what was good for him, he would deal with him in the end. Yang Chen's attitude towards these sects had always been that if they wanted to court death, he would help them. Moreover, after Sister Aolan heard about this, she had already shown an attitude of letting Yang Chen do as he saw fit. Obviously, she had seen through his previous arrangements. Therefore, Yang Chen took advantage of the situation and asked Gong Sunling to temporarily stop refining the spiritual realm. Long Can and Long Ke were studying and cultivating Yanglan's cultivation method. Originally, most of their energy was restrained by Gong Sunling, so it was very difficult for them to cultivate. At this time, when Gong Sunling stopped, Long Can and Long Ke immediately relaxed a lot and began to cultivate with all their might. As for refining the mountain river geographical map, that was something that could be done after the cultivation method was completed. At this time, whether it was Long Can or Long Ke, they weren't that stupid to provoke Gong Sunling. When they saw that Gong Sunling had stopped, the Zhao clan didn't respond either. This made the sect even more certain that Long Can was showing goodwill. After observing for a few days and finding nothing abnormal, these sects each sent a group of disciples into the spiritual realm. In the hearts of these sects, this was also showing goodwill to Long Can. One had to know that by sending disciples into the spiritual realm, it could be said that their life and death were already in the hands of the Zhao clan. This showed that they trusted the Zhao clan. If Long Can and Long Ke really wanted to communicate with each other, they wouldn't be as distant as before. As expected, after these disciples entered the spiritual realm, their figures immediately disappeared. This wasn't because these disciples had high cultivation and were fast, but because the owner of the spiritual realm had directly transferred them to another place. The disciples that were sent in by the sect all used dwelling divine jade. This was also why they had the courage to express their trust. It had been more than 10 days since those disciples had disappeared, but there was still no news from Long Can. This made the sect feel a little nervous. However, it was fortunate that there was nothing wrong with the dwelling divine jade of those disciples. This meant that they were still alive and not in danger of dying. This gave the sect a greater sense of relief. Perhaps those disciples were communicating with Long Can. After all, many sects had sent disciples in. It was impossible for Long Can to join all of them. Just choosing which sect to join would take some time. Chapter 2439. Compared with the great expectations of the sect at the moment, Yang Chen's mood couldn't be described with words. He was really unable to say anything about the practices of the sect. What were Long Can and Long Ke doing? Others didn't know, but how could Yang Chen not know? At the moment, they were practicing another cultivation method that Yang Chen had created by forcibly devouring memories from Yanglan's sea of consciousness. Of course, Yangchen couldn't blame these sects' decisions subjectively. After all, they weren't like Yangchen, who clearly knew what was going on. They could only guess the truth of the matter based on these observable behaviors. Unfortunately, Yangchen couldn't tell them the inside story, so they could only explore in the dark. What made Yangchen a little speechless was that the sect actually sent a lot of experts into Long Can's territory, and then they were transferred to other places by Long Can. Yangchen believed that these experts who entered Long Can's territory had definitely used the dwelling god Jade. Even if they died inside, it was just another experience of death. For them, it wasn't a bad thing. From these arrangements, at least these tempted sect were not completely unprepared. But Yangchen was still very speechless, especially for the behavior of the masters of the various sects going in. He was particularly speechless. In his opinion, if they just left some news, it was normal, but sending experts in was purely sending food. Long Can and Long Ke practiced Yanglan's self-created cultivation method, but Yanglan's self-created cultivation method was improved on the basis of his own cultivation method. What cultivation method did Yanglan practice? The Great Unrestrained Demon Heart Sutra. After Yanglan's improvement, the Great Unrestrained Demon Heart Sutra no longer needed to use the opposite sex cauldron to improve cultivation in the spiritual realm. However, in essence, there was no earth-shaking change. It still needed to use a cauldron. The higher the cultivation of the cultivator, the better the effect of assisting in practicing the Great Unrestrained Demon Heart Sutra. The Zhao family cultivators were all dead, and there were no spiritual realm cultivators inside. Basically, when Long Can and Long Ke cultivated, other than using the demonic beasts that had been corroded by the demonic aura, there were no cauldrons that could help them cultivate. Those crazy demonic beasts no longer had the qualifications to become human cauldrons. They had not experienced heavenly tribulations, had not cultivated systematically, and did not even have the most basic intelligence. Even if there were a lot of them, how much help could Long Can and Long Ke get from these demonic beasts? However, without a human cauldron, even a peak golden immortal like Long Can and Long Ke would not be able to successfully cultivate the Great Unrestrained Demon Heart Sutra in such a short period of time. This was a necessary condition for the cultivation of demonic arts. So no matter how hard the two of them worked or how talented they would not be able to complete the basic cultivation method. At such a critical moment, each sect sent dozens of experts into Long Can and Long Ke's territory. They were afraid that ordinary cultivators would not be able to handle some complicated situations. Therefore, the experts that each sect sent were all true experts, Xian Immortal elites. Yangchen wanted to cry, but no tears came out. With so many sects sending dozens of experts in, it was equivalent to sending dozens of human cauldrons. In total, there were close to 1,000 of them. With 1,000 Xian Immortal experts as human cauldrons, not to mention the Great Unrestrained Demon Heart Sutra, they would be able to successfully cultivate a cultivation method that was 100 times more complicated. Of course, those cultivators did not die. How could Long Can and Long Ke bear to let them die? Such good human cauldrons that came to their doorstep would naturally be accepted. Then, they would make proper arrangements for them. Why would they kill them? Of course, all this was caused by the difference in information. However, there was nothing Yangchen could do about it. If he didn't want to expose all his trump cards to the Joint Command, perhaps he could only accept this fact. Some things had their own causes, and they could not be forced. Yangchen was not worried about how strong Long Can and Long Ke would be after they successfully cultivated them. He was only worried about Ao Lan and the others. After all, Long Can and Long Ke were traitors of the dragon race. Before Ao Lan and the others made a move, Yangchen could only watch. At best, Yangchen could only be present and protect their lives. However, he could not make a move for them. Yangchen could only wait for the dragon race to make a move before he could make a move. Originally, Yangchen only wanted to test out the strongest Long Can and Long Quebec. In the end, it resulted in a series of problems. However, Yangchen was not someone who was afraid of trouble. Even the Zhao clan, which had tens of millions of cultivators, was already destroyed. Only Long Can and Long K remained. Could Yang Chun still shrink back? If there was trouble, he would deal with it first. Then, he would continue with his plan. When Yang Chun made this decision, he suddenly discovered that he seemed to be acting a little like Big Brother Li Cheng. No matter how complicated the matter was, as long as he grasped the main objective and laid out the plan early, it would be fine. If he met with a setback along the way, he would think of a way to deal with it and continue on his way. Back then, didn't Big Brother Li Cheng also feel disheartened when Yang Chun and Gong Sunling could not refine the demonic world? However, in the end, he still pushed the matter of the spiritual world to this stage. Now, Aolan's big sister was in the Divine Dragon Palace every day, watching the space on the other side like she was waiting for Long Can and Long K signal. This was a tacit understanding between the dragon race. Even the traders of the dragon race would have it. Yang Chun did not know what kind of method this was. However, he knew that once Long Can and Long K successfully cultivated that cultivation technique, they would send out a message, leading Ao Lan and the others over. Big sister, do you feel guilty for Long Can and Long K? Yang Chun did not forget to remind Ao Lan at an appropriate time, lest they become unstable when facing Long Can and Long K, becoming the fuse for failure. When Xiao Chun heard Ao Lan and the others mention Long Can's background, he saw Ao Lan's expression. Such a mental state was not good when facing the strongest Long Can and Long Quebec. Don't worry. Ao Lan was very grateful for Yang Chen's kind intentions. She directly indicated that there was no need to worry. At the start, Long Can did indeed suffer some grievances. However, it was wrong for him to kill a fellow clansman. Furthermore, at this point, Ao Lan hesitated for a while and did not continue. Not to mention what? Yang Chun was very cooperative and asked. He did not just kill the fellow clansman who mocked him for being crippled. Aolan's big sister's gaze also turned cold as she spoke. He also killed the second one, that dragon puppet. Looking at big sister Aolan's gaze, Yang Chun understood. Perhaps Long Can killed the first fellow clansman because the other party mocked and insulted him. Even if he was too heavy-handed, it was pardonable. However, he should not have killed the dragon puppet and refined the corpse of his clansman into a puppet. This was the true way of seeking death in Ao Lan's eyes. Chapter 2440. Since Big Sister Ao Lan and the rest were not just feeling guilty, Yang Chun was not worried that something would happen to them when they were dealing with the traitors. The current situation was waiting for Long Can and Long K to issue a challenge. Regardless of whether it was their fellow Dragon Tribe members or Yang Chun, Long Can and Long K had to face them. In fact, because their natal treasures were implicated, Long Can and Long K could not ascend even if they wanted to. This did not mean that they could not trigger the heavenly tribulation under such circumstances. However, once they triggered the heavenly tribulation, whether it was Gong Sunling, Yang Chun, or the other experts of the Dragon Tribe, they would all take advantage of the heavenly tribulation to attack them. The heavenly tribulation triggered by a peak golden immortal was extremely powerful. If they were besieged, they would definitely die a horrible death. Even Long Can and Long K did not dare to take this risk. If they could not pass the heavenly tribulation, they could only be restrained. Fortunately, the experts sent by the sect had brought them the human cauldrons that they desired. This made it easy for them to cultivate the cultivation technique that Yang Lan had left behind. It was not difficult to cultivate Yang Lan's cultivation technique successfully. What was difficult was the process of nurturing and tempering another sea of consciousness. This was a process that required years of polishing. Furthermore, it had to be in line with Yang Lan's split personality. Of course, this did not seem to be a problem for Long Can and Long Quebec. The upper echelons of the various sect who had sent their disciples into Long Can space were like ants on a hot pan. They were restless and anxiously waiting for their own disciples to appear. Whether they succeeded or not, they should at least give them a message. They could not be tormented like this. Fortunately, the dwelling divine jade left behind by all the disciples did not show any abnormalities. This meant that the disciples' lives were not in danger. However, the more this was the case, the more these upper echelons felt like a cat was scratching their hearts. Didn't this mean that there was still room for discussion on Long Can's side? Finally, after a few months that felt like years, there was a sudden flash of light at the spatial boundary between the two sides. Hundreds of figures suddenly appeared on Long Can's side. It seemed that the disciples sent by the various sects had finally appeared. The disciples in charge of the sect, who had been waiting impatiently, rushed forward when they saw the unusual situation. Seeing that they were a little weak, he didn't care about anything else. He would first grab those guys who suddenly appeared and bring them to the mountain river geographical map. The specific situation would wait until he stayed in his own territory to see. After all the figures were dragged to the mountain river geographical map, the disciples began to identify these figures one by one. Soon, the figures that appeared were separated according to the sect's sex, and the cultivators who knew them also recognized them. However, looking at their current situation, all the disciples of the sect, regardless of which sect they were from, felt their hearts skip a beat. When he first saw them, he could tell that there was something wrong with these cultivators. At that time, everyone was afraid that there might be a problem, so they didn't bother to look too much and only focused on snatching people. Now that they took a closer look, they realized that almost all of the cultivators who entered the Dragon Remnant space had fallen below the human immortal stage. What was going on? No one present was able to figure it out. They could only send people to inform the leaders of the various sects, while the others quietly guarded here. Soon, the higher-ups of the sect rushed over. When they saw the miserable state of the disciples, they were all stunned. However, the higher-ups were still higher-ups. After all, they were old foxes who wouldn't change their expressions even if Mount Tai collapsed in front of them. They calmly took the disciples of their respective sect back and began to carefully examine and question them. After asking, the higher-ups of the various sects became even more confused. All of the disciples said frankly that they had never seen the figure of the other. They had just been suddenly sent to a place where they had been placed under house arrest. They had no idea what they had been through every day, but their cultivation bases had been constantly dropping. When it was about time, they had been sent back. The experts in charge of the examination were helpless when faced with this inexplicable drop in cultivation. They couldn't find any wounds on their bodies, nor were they poisoned, especially since these cultivators were cultivating normally every day, but their cultivation kept falling. To say that they were being plucked, there must be some contact, but they hadn't even seen each other's faces. How would they talk about contact? Master Yang was quickly invited by a few closer sect members. In terms of healing and treatment, it was estimated that there was no one in the spiritual world who had a better say than Master Yang. Yang Chen only glanced at them and immediately turned away. He didn't even look at them anymore. Several high-ranking officials who accompanied him hurriedly went out and respectfully asked for advice. This is the result of being used as a furnace by a cultivator who cultivates the Great Devil Heart Sutra. Yang Chen pointed out the key in a sentence. Let the disciples who have dealt with the matters of the past in the mortal world know at a glance. Not to mention that Yang Chen knew the cause and effect. Even if he didn't know, Yang Chen could also be sure. When they were in the mortal world, the female cultivators who were used as furnaces by Li Heng, the young sect master of the Taishaman sect, were almost exactly the same as these cultivators. The difference was that this cultivation method had been improved by Yang Lan, and it didn't strictly require cultivators of the opposite sex. At the same time, it didn't have to be so cruel to cultivate. Hearing Yang Chen's words, all parties were shocked. After being identified by the relevant disciples, it was indeed so. The Joint Command suddenly became alert, as if they were facing a great enemy. Before, there was Yang Lan, who cultivated the Great Devil Heart Sutra, which caused millions of cultivators to the spiritual world and the Zhao family. If there was another master of the Dragon Clan, wouldn't it be even more deadly? After this time, all parties no longer dared to hold irresponsible fantasies about Long Can, and treated Long Can as a more ferocious enemy than the Zhao family. This was a master of the peak Golden Immortal. Yang Lan, who was in the middle and late Xian Immortal stage, had already turned the world upside down. How terrifying would it be if Long can personally go up, just as all parties were preparing for a great enemy? A strong aura suddenly rose in a certain direction in the Longkin space. This aura was so huge that even the cultivators on the other side of the mountain river geographical map could sense it. Ao Lon, Long Quang, and the other experts of the Dragon Clan who were waiting in the Dragon Palace seemed to have seen a signal at that moment. They all leaped up and looked in that direction. Ao Lon and Long Quang even quickly recovered their dragon form and let out a low roar in that direction. After a long time, two similar low roars came from the Dragon Palace. Ao Lon directly turned to Yang Chun and said, "They have issued a challenge to us. We have to go and fight." After saying that, they didn't care about Yang Chen's reaction. All the dragons flew up and flew in that direction at high speed. Yang Chun didn't say anything. The Dragon Palace was closed. He flew up and quickly chased after their figures. These scenes were not concealed from the outside. Many interested cultivators suddenly saw the 9 living dragons suddenly appear and fly directly into the space of the dragon, and then saw Master Yang Chun chasing after them. Suddenly, countless people had a stunned expression. Chapter 2441. The big shots of the spiritual realm had a very high opinion of Yang Chun. They had long known that Yang Chun had a good relationship with the 2 experts of the Dragon Clan. However, when the Black Heaven sect was destroyed, a 3rd expert of the Dragon Clan appeared, an expert that they had never seen before. At that time, everyone had a whole new level of respect for Yang Chun. A human cultivator who was able to have a relationship with 3 proud experts of the Dragon Clan could basically be said to be able to do whatever he wanted in the spiritual realm. When had any cultivators ever seen an expert of the Dragon Clan become friends with a cultivator of another race? Even in the Immortal world, it was said that the Dragon Clan was a maverick and almost didn't communicate with other cultivators. They had thought that this was Yang Chen's limit. Unexpectedly, 9 experts of the Dragon Clan suddenly flew out from Yang Chen's side. This directly shocked those who thought that they knew Yang Chun very well. How is this possible? 9 experts of the Dragon Clan. It was hard to say if there were more than 15 members of the Dragon Clan in the spiritual realm. Yang Chun actually had 9 friends of the Dragon Clan. Some experts instantly estimated the cultivation level of those experts of the Dragon Clan and were shocked by their own estimation. Oh my God! 2 peak Golden Immortals, 6 early to late Golden Immortals, and 1 peak Xian Immortal. Even if the weakest peak Xian Immortal could be ignored, there were still 8 Golden Immortals. Wait, since when could peak Xian Immortal be ignored? After recovering from a shock, those people who had figured it out finally reacted. Peak Xian Immortal. Apart from the few Golden Immortal Grandmasters in the lower realm, the strongest people in the major sect were probably these peak Xian Immortal cultivators. Each super sect had no more than 3 peak Xian Immortal experts. However, Yang Chen's family, from Patriarch Yang Chun to his 4 wives and 7 concubines, were all peak Xian Immortals. It could even be said that among the peak Xian Immortal experts of the 4 sects of the Tao sect, Yang Chen's wives and concubines were also peak Xian Immortals. The 5 Elements sect had the most advantage. There were 5 Murong sisters. There was 1 missing because that person wasn't a peak Xian Immortal. Come to think of it, the only person in Yang Chen's family who was not at the peak of Xian Immortal stage was Granny Tian Qin, who was now Light Note Fairy Zhou Xianying. It was not that everyone ignored her, but her cultivation was no longer at the peak of Xian Immortal stage, but at the Golden Immortal stage. It was said that Yang Chun had a friend, a man named Lin Jingyuan, who was also a Golden Immortal expert. In this way, among Yang Chen's family and friends, there were 2 peak stage Golden Immortals, 8 ordinary Golden Immortals, and 44 peak stage Profound Immortals. With such a force, anyone would have to mourn for the unfortunate enemy. No wonder Yang Chun and his family were indifferent when the sect was tempted by the Dragon Tribe expert from the Zhao family. If someone had 9 dragon friends, and 2 of them were peak Golden Immortals, would he still want to find a peak Golden Immortal dragon who used to be his enemy and whose attitude he didn't know? What kind of attitude should he have when facing an 8th level alchemist who had such a powerful force quietly? Even if all the previous things about strength were excluded, just an 8th level alchemist was enough to make people worship him. The strength in front, on the other hand, gave Master Yang, this 8th grade alchemist, a shiny layer of golden film. If they knew that there was Li Cheng, whom they had no idea about, in the Dragon Palace, as well as more than 1,000 Madame Bai and her maidservants whose cultivation was sealed at the peak of Immortal, these guys would be scared to the ground. Not to mention how powerful the Mountain River geographical map was now. Even the cultivators who knew nothing about the Mountain River geographical map, after seeing the despair brought by Long Can's crazy refining of the spiritual realm, knew how powerful the magic treasure that could compete with Long Can's space magic treasure was. The sect masters of the sect who had plotted against Gong Sunling's Mountain River geographical map were scared to death when they heard the news. If they had known that Yang Chun was in such a situation, they wouldn't have agreed with their golden immortal grandmasters. Now that those golden immortal grandmasters were still being punished by Yang Chun, they would let them suffer for a few more days. It would also let them know how difficult it was to survive in the spiritual realm. They couldn't do whatever they wanted just by relying on their golden immortal cultivation. Not to mention the reactions of the people in the spiritual realm, Yang Chun didn't care about these trivial things at all. He just wanted to see Long Can and Long K and see the battle between the Dragon Clan. Sister Ao Lan and the others came with the idea of cleaning up the traitors of the Dragon Clan. Yang Chun would only sit and not participate. Even if he had a fight with Long Can and Long K, Yang Chun wouldn't take advantage of them after the battle. Therefore, this time, Yang Chun was just a spectator and a referee. The Dragon Clan experts didn't fly very fast. At the very least, Yang Chun was very clear that although they were flying at high speed in the eyes of ordinary cultivators in the spiritual realm, compared to the top speed of Ao Lan and the others, this speed was just like a jog. Yang Chun also knew why Sister Ao Lan and Long Quang were like this. Their speed didn't seem fast, but every time they flew, the aura of Sister Ao Lan, Long Quang, and the rest of the Long Clan would increase. On the way to the appointment, they relied on this slow speed to slowly accumulate and increase their aura. This was a reason why Sister Ao Lan maintained this speed. At the same time, this was also one of the reasons why Yang Chun was filled with anticipation for this battle. From this small detail, whether it was Ao Lan, Long Quang, or the other 6 Dragon Clan experts, none of them underestimated their enemy. They all treated Long Can and Long K as a great enemy. The only sloppy one was Ao Lai. He was only a peak Xian immortal and couldn't interfere in a battle between peak golden immortals. You're a freak. While flying, Ao Lai purposely lagged behind and flew alongside Yang Chun. He was very dissatisfied with Yang Chun. Of course, this was just a joke between friends. It had nothing to do with anything else. Ao Lai was actually very dissatisfied in his heart. However, he didn't have any temper. If he couldn't win, then he couldn't win. If he couldn't participate, then he couldn't participate. He knew his own limits. However, Yang Chen's cultivation was the same as his. They were both peak Xian immortals. However, Long Can and Long K valued Yang Chen more than Ao Lan and Long Quang. This was the difference. Using the word freak to describe Xiao Chun wasn't very appropriate. This was because the Dragon Clan was much more freakish than the other races. It was precisely because of this that Ao Lai used the word freak to describe Yang Chun. At the same time, he was also venting the dissatisfaction in his heart. Who asked him to be a spectator in this battle and not be able to participate? Chapter 2442. Along the way, everyone did not rest at all. Every once in a while, about 1 hour, Ao Lan and the others would collectively let out a deep roar. Then, their auras would soar again. Yangshin could sense that Long Can and Long K's auras were also rising. Every time they roared in response, their auras would rise slightly. Like Ao Lan and the others, Long Can and Long K were also storing up power. This was a battle where the Dragon Race Princess led her clansmen to clean up the traitors of her race. Without a doubt, both sides were taking this seriously. Both sides knew that the other party was not easy to deal with. That was why such a situation occurred. However, what confused Yang Chun was that he still could not understand why A.O. Lan did not charge over while Long Can and Long K were still cultivating. After all, Long Can was a traitor of the dragon race. He had killed at least 2 of his clansmen. Such a traitor did not need to charge over so formally. Perhaps it was the pride of the dragon race that they had to give a traitor of their race a decent chance. Yang Chun could not understand such pride. In fact, he suspected that it was not because of this. This was because A.O. Lan was no longer as proud as before. Even Long Quang was the same. They could even transform into their human forms and calmly face everyone other than Yang Chen's family. It would be too much to say that such dragon race experts were very proud. Since it was not because of pride, perhaps there was another reason. Actually, this was what Yang Chun was most worried about. Even though he had asked A.O. Lan if she felt guilty about Long Can, A.O. Lan had denied it. However, now, Yang Chun felt uncertain. Such behavior was too strange. Not to mention A.O. Lan, even Long Quang, the fellow who was nearly killed by Long Can, had the same attitude. This was not normal. Even if Long Quang did not want to make things difficult for A.O. Lan because of his deep love for her, the other 6 Long clan experts did not have such concerns. They should have at least gnashed their teeth in hatred, right? However, none of them did so. Every one of them was as serious as A.O. Lan and Long Quang. This made Yang Chun worry. There was something extremely abnormal about this, which made Yang Chun very puzzled. While Yang Chun was worried, he did not fear that A.O. Lan and the others' lives would be in danger. This was because Yang Chun himself was not far away, watching the battle. This was the greatest reassurance. As long as his life was not in danger, he did not need to worry too much about any disaster. After all, they had even encountered something as heaven-defying as the refinement of the spirit realm. So could there be something even more significant in the spirit realm? The place where Long Can and Long K had issued their challenge was very far away. They had crossed more than half of the 60% of the demon realm that Long Can had refined. Just along the way, Yang Chun and big sister A.O. Lan flew at a speed that was faster than most cultivators using swordkinesis flight. They had flown for an entire month. It had to be said that Long Can and Long K also placed great importance on this challenge. They did not directly use the power of space to bring A.O. Lan and the others to the place they wanted to challenge. Instead, they used some profound method to send their voices and auras into the range of their opponents. At the same time, they were also storing up power and waiting to attack. One could easily imagine how much importance they placed on this battle. No matter how long the road was, it would eventually come to an end. Yang Chun finally saw Long Can and Long Quebec Long Can and Long K had already been waiting on 2 chairs in a huge plaza for a long time. On the other side of the plaza, there were chairs for the dragon race, which were exactly the same as the ones in the 9 dragon palaces. At the same time, there was also a human chair prepared for Yang Chun. A.O. Lan did not stand on ceremony at all. She directly sat on the chair in the middle. Long Quang sat beside her. Then, the 6 experts of the Long clan sat on either side. As for Yang Chun and A.O. Lai, they consciously sat at a spot slightly further away. Just from the arrangement of the chairs, it looked like Long Can and Long K had already guessed what A.O. Lan and the others were thinking. Long Can and Long K sat on 2 chairs that were separated by a jade table. Their upper bodies were exposed. It was impossible to tell if they were sharing the same body. Based on their attributes and auras, Yang Chun could tell who was who. However, if Yang Chun had to differentiate based on their appearances, Yang Chun could only shake his head. In reality, if one did not look at their auras and attributes, almost all the members of the dragon race looked exactly the same. There was no way to tell them apart. Long Can, please stop. A.O. Lan and the others did not attack immediately. Instead, they advised sternly, as long as you are willing to stop and accept the punishment of being imprisoned for 10,000 years, I will not pursue your crime of killing your own race. Killing my own race? Long Xiong? Long Can laughed coldly and did not comment. Long K, who was at the side, had no interest in speaking. From the start, he had not said a single word. Long Xiong insulted you and your parents. He only has himself to blame for his death. Ao Lan replied expressionlessly to Long Can. However, his aura did not weaken at all. On the other hand, Yang Chun became interested as he listened. There was something fishy going on here. It was definitely not as simple as Long Can killing his own race like Ao Lan said. Even Ao Lan did not think much of this fellow called Long Xiong being killed. Then, is it fine if I beat your lover half to death? Long Can looked like he had a cheap mouth. At the very least, he had a cheap mouth now. He used a frivolous tone to ask this question. As long as you agree to the princess's request, I can pretend that you injured me did not happen. There was no need for Ao Lan to reply. Long Quang continued. Furthermore, I cause you to be insignificant, controlled by the Zhao clan for tens of thousands of years. It is my fault. I apologize to you. Xiao Chun could tell that Long Quang originally wanted to say insignificant ant. However, when he considered that Yang Chun was not far away, he changed his words. No matter what, the Zhao clan was of human origin. It was not good to look down on them in front of Yang Chun. Furthermore, after the lesson with Yang Chen's family, Long Quang rarely looked down on others with that lofty gaze. However, Long Quang was still very proud. However, he was proud with confidence now. It was not the kind of arrogance that he was born with. At the very least, Long Quang was not at a disadvantage in their earlier conversation. When Long Can said that he beat Long Quang half to death, Long Quang immediately retaliated by saying that he caused him to be controlled by the Zhao clan for tens of thousands of years. However, even until now, Yang Chun could not understand. Didn't Ao Lan say that Long Xiong killed his own race and refined them into puppets? That was an unforgivable crime. Why did he not mention it until now? What made Yang Chun even more puzzled was that it seemed that among the masters of the Long family, there were also 3 who showed puzzled expressions, and the other 3 with the highest cultivation base were indifferent to this. It looks like your current condition is pretty good. Long Can looked at Long Quang with interest. He even had a meaningful smile on his face. My body, do you feel good using it? Suddenly, Long K opened his mouth, which made Yang Chun stunned on the spot. Chapter 2443. The moment Long K opened his mouth, Yang Chun was startled. So the dragon puppet was Long K's body? This joke was too big. Because Ao Lai had taken over Long Quang's body, Yang Chun had prepared a dragon puppet's body for Long Quang to compensate him. Then, he had the Murong sisters nourish it with the 5 elements. Then, he had used many karmic body-tempering pills to make the dragon puppet's postnatal 5 elements spiritual root. Finally, he had refined the body fusion pill with great difficulty. Only then did Long Quang perfectly fuse with this body. In the end, Long K suddenly jumped out and said that this body was his. Wasn't this putting Yang Chun in a difficult position? Because in the end, it was Yang Chun who had caused trouble for Ao Lai. Ao Lan must have been very clear at that time, but why didn't she say it? After thinking about it carefully, Yang Chun came to a realization. At that time, everyone thought that Long K was already dead. That meant that the dragon spirit of the dragon puppet was already dead, leaving only the body that was refined into a puppet. No one expected him to still be alive. Therefore, since Ao Lai, who was born in the royal family, had taken over Long Quang's body, it was logical that Long Quang had taken over Long K's body. Furthermore, Long K was definitely not called Long K at that time, but something else. Otherwise, everyone would not have been so indifferent after hearing his name. However, along the way, Long K had also released his aura. Therefore, the few elders of the dragon race knew Long K's true identity. The 3 young experts of the Long clan definitely did not know these secrets. They must have ascended or been born after this incident. Therefore, they had a confused expression along the way. As for Ao Lan, Long Quang, and the other 3 experts of the Long clan, they definitely knew the Long K of the past. Naturally, since Long K was not dead, then the crime of Ao Lan killing the 2nd dragon expert in anger could not be placed on him. This would explain why Ao Lan did not mention anything about the crime she was so angry with earlier. As for what Long K was called in the past, that was no longer the main point. The main point was why Long K was willing to give up his body and let Long K refine it into a puppet. Could it be that the dragon race was so bored that they did not care about their own lives? Why? Without needing Yang Chun to ask any further, Long Kwang had already asked. Other than Long Kan and Long K, everyone in the dragon race was confused, let alone Long Kwang. They could not understand why Long K was willing to do this. No reason. Long K's voice was filled with laughter. He didn't hide anything and directly told Lin Fan the reason. My aptitude has been average since I was young. Long can use this method to help me raise my postnatal spiritual roots and raise my cultivation. I was about to succeed, but you beat me to it. Tell me why? In this way, everyone, including Yang Chun, was suddenly enlightened. Long K's aptitude wasn't fake and his spiritual root wasn't strong. Therefore, he would definitely be the laughingstock of the dragon tribe, just like Long Kan. The two of them should have gone through similar experiences. It was just that Long K did not go as far as Long Kan, who killed his own kind. Since Long K's aptitude wasn't good, it was understandable that Long Kan was allowed to use this method to raise his postnatal spiritual root. As for whether this method had been used before, Yang Chun did not dare to say for sure. However, based on the dragon puppet's condition, its earth's spiritual roots should be close to the maximum value. On this point, Long Kan and Long K had no need to lie when they were being pursued by their own kind. It was no wonder that Yang Chun had never heard of the dragon puppet appearing in his previous life. So there was a reason for this. The 8 Xian immortal experts were sealed in various parts of the spiritual realm, not just to trigger the demonic calamity, but also to nourish the dragon puppet's body. When the time was up, Long K would definitely take back his body and turn it into another expert of the dragon race. If you're willing to turn back, I can return your body to you. Long Kwang was very responsible at this moment. It was a fact that he had taken over Long K's body, so he did not hesitate to make a promise to Lin Fan. Originally, Yang Chun wanted to say something because this matter was related to him. The dragon puppet was dug out by Yang Chun and used to exchange for A.O. Lai's use of Long Kwang's body. If Long Kwang handed over his body at this time, Yang Chun would not be able to find a suitable body for him. However, after thinking about it, Yang Chun gave up. Since the exchange had already been made, the dragon puppet's body was no longer his. If Long Kwang was willing, it was his own business. Yang Chun really had no right to stop him. Moreover, the dragon puppet was buried there because it was arranged by others. If one had to pursue the matter, it should be Yang Chun who took their things. If one did not consider the relationship between the two sides, then it was indeed wrong for Yang Chun to take someone else's body without asking. However, since they were enemies, it was a different matter. The dragon puppet could only be considered as a seizure. He took it with a clear conscience, and there was no need for him to feel any psychological burden. Since it was a matter of the dragon race, Yang Chun did not say much and just watched. He wanted to see how Long Kan and Long K would react. Now, there's no need. Long K shook his head. If everything goes according to plan, the dragon puppet can at most reach the intermediate stage of the golden immortal stage. Although I don't know what method you use to raise your cultivation so quickly, if it was me, I would not have the strength to do so. The current situation is pretty good. Long K's words were very calm. He did not seem to be angry that his body had been snatched away. It sounded like what he said was the truth. At that time, the dragon puppet was indeed only at the intermediate stage of the golden immortal stage. If not for Yang Chun using a large number of spirit herbs and heavenly essence pills, Long Kwang would only be at the intermediate stage of the golden immortal stage. Without heavenly essence pills, it was simply impossible to cultivate from the intermediate stage of the golden immortal stage to the peak of the golden immortal stage in a short 1,000 years. One had to know that even someone as strong as Ao Lan, the princess of the dragon race's royal family, used tens of thousands of years to cultivate from the peak of the human immortal stage to the late stage of the golden immortal stage. The final breakthrough was brought about by Yang Chun. If it had been based on a normal cultivation speed, Long Kan, who was about the same as Long Kwang, would not have been able to reach the peak of the golden immortal stage. However, it was not just Long Can. Even Long K had reached the peak of the golden immortal stage. This made people curious. Without the help of heavenly essence pills and Yang Chen's spirit herbs, how did they do it? Long Ke might be a little more understandable. After all, if he could refine space, the increase in cultivation brought about by the enhancement of his natal treasure was almost limitless. A powerful treasure that could refine the spiritual world would definitely allow Long Can to reach the peak of the golden immortal stage. As for Gong Sunling, if not for Gong Sunling forcefully suppressing him, he would definitely have surpassed his current realm. The problem was, what method did Long K use to reach the peak of the golden immortal stage? From the looks of it, he seemed to be very satisfied with his current situation. Chapter 2444. As Yang Chun listened at the side, he suddenly felt that the situation was very strange. At the start, Ao Lan and the others definitely wanted to kill the traitor. However, now, if they did not pursue Long Can's crime of killing his own race, then it would not be right to call Long Can a traitor. However, both sides were in such high spirits. What was it for? Turn back, Ao Lan said again, using the same words. However, based on Ao Lan's big sister, she had probably reached the limits of her tolerance. If Long Can and Long K did not agree, they could only make a move. I did not go the wrong way. Why are you talking about turning back? Long Can said with a cold smile. How stubborn. Ao Lan raged. Are you really willing to do anything for the sake of strength? After saying so much, aren't we just going to see who is stronger? Long Can ignored Ao Lan's reprimand. He flew up and roared at Ao Lan and Long K. Receive my move. Yang Chun was still thinking about what Ao Lan said about Long Can doing anything for the sake of strength. However, Long Can had already started fighting. Yang Chun immediately stopped thinking and watched the fight. A dragon image flew up, carrying two experts with it. Long Can and Long K attacked at nearly the same time. Their complete figures appeared before everyone's eyes. Two heads, two long necks, and a dragon body that was about half the length of an ordinary dragon race member. A two-headed dragon. Indeed, as Yang Chun and the dragon race members expected, Long Can and Long K were indeed two-headed dragons. Although they did not know what method Long Can use to let Long K take over the position of a dead dragon head, the current situation was simply the most suitable for Yang Lan's self-created cultivation technique to create another sea of consciousness. Yang Lan had two personalities. He was schizophrenic. He had to forcefully split his sea of consciousness into two and worry about which of the two consciousnesses was the dominant one. However, Long Can and Long K did not have this problem. They were two separate bodies. They could control their own sea of consciousness. In terms of cultivation and usage, they were naturally one level higher than Yang Lan. Furthermore, the two heads shared one body. Then, they used Yang Lan's cultivation technique to merge them. What they achieved was not 1 + 1 = 2. Instead, it was more than 1 + 1 = 2. It was several times more than two individuals working together. Just by looking at the tacit attacks of the two fellows, one could see the clues. Ao Lan and Long Quang did not show any signs of weakness. The two lovers followed closely behind Long Can and flew up. They split into two directions and attacked Long Can and Long Quebec. Long Can and Long K shared the same body, so their consciousnesses were connected. This was a good thing, but it also had a fatal weakness, which was that they couldn't attack from two different directions at the same time. They only had one body, and that was the limitation. As for Ao Lan Quang, it was clear that Ao Lan Quang had rich combat experience. This was the first time that Yang Chun had seen a battle between dragons. Furthermore, it was a battle between two dragons. It was an eye-opening experience. All else aside, just the fact that the 4 peak-level golden immortals from the dragon clan were using their claws and fangs to attack was enough to make the blood of all the cultivators who saw it boil. It looked like a simple grab, but it brought with it a power that could destroy the world. However, both sides controlled it extremely well, limiting it to the area where their bodies were in contact with each other. There was almost no leakage of power. Occasionally, a few uncontrollable attacks of spiritual power would escape, and they would always bring about changes to the surrounding space that could move mountains and fill up seas. Occasionally, scales and claws would come into contact with each other in the area above and below the three dragons. Every time they came into contact, it would leave a clear wound on the other party. Regardless of whether it was spiritual energy or spiritual sense, they filled that small area, causing it to be impenetrable. Occasionally, a few rocks would fly into that area, but before they came into contact with anything, they would shatter into nothingness. It was as if they had never appeared. It looked like the battle was very barbaric and there was nothing to see. However, the ground beneath their flying bodies had already caved in, forming a huge crater that was hundreds of feet deep. The strange thing was that there was not a single speck of dust flying into the air. Every time there was a hint of dust rising, it would either be shattered into nothingness by the omnipresent force or be pressed back into the ground by the immense pressure. The bottom of the crater was already a structure that was harder than iron and stone. The 6 experts from the Long clan were anxiously staring at the direction of the battle. Their eyes were fixed on it, and their entire body was in preparation. It seemed like they would immediately rush out if anything went wrong. Relatively speaking, Yangchun and Ao Lai were a lot more relaxed. It might be a bit inappropriate to say relaxed, but it was more appropriate to describe it as sloppy. These two guys didn't intend to make a move from the beginning, so they didn't accumulate power on the road. At this moment, they didn't need to make too much preparation. They were completely acting as outsiders watching the show. What was even more excessive was that Yangchun didn't know where he got a jar of wine from. He took out 3 large wine cups and drank with Ao Lai one by one. He didn't care that this was the fiercest battle in the spiritual world. The reason why there were 3 was that the other one was prepared for Shao Tian. This was the battle scene of the pure dragon clan. How could he let Shao Tian, a descendant of the dragon clan, see it? This guy was as unscrupulous as his master. His body shrank and soaked directly in the wine cup. Then he stared at the battle in the distance with relish. The battle between the dragon clan was simply something that could be encountered but not sought. Unfortunately, for the sake of Ao Lan and Kuang Long's faces, Yang Chun did not bring his huge clan to watch the battle. In Yang Chen's eyes, although Ao Lan and Kuang Long had great teamwork, they could not compare to Long Can and Long Ke, who were practically one. Furthermore, Ao Lan brought the experts of the Long clan this time. Yang Chun did not know what his considerations were. However, in his heart, just this action was enough to show that Ao Lan had lost in terms of the overall situation. If one considered the home ground advantage, it could be said that Ao Lan and Kuang Long had no advantage. If not for Yang Chun looking sloppy on the surface and restraining Long Can and Long Ke, not daring to use the power of space, Ao Lan and Kuang Long would have been at a disadvantage long ago. Although it looked like they were evenly matched, everyone here was an elite who had experienced hundreds of battles. How could they not see that Ao Lan and Kuang Long were starting to show signs of defeat? Long Yuan was the most impatient. He could not help but straighten his body. Everyone came together. If Ao Lan and Kuang Long could not hold on, Long Yuan would have to join the battle. However, just as Long Yuan's body moved, a berserk aura came from the surroundings. This aura was very strange. Everyone who was paying attention to the battle situation did not notice how this berserk aura appeared. When the Long clan experts looked over, they were all startled. In just a short while, countless golden immortal and peak Xian immortal demonic beasts appeared around them. All of them had bloodshot eyes, looking like they would pounce ferociously in the next moment. Chapter 2445. The demon beasts that had suddenly appeared were obviously those crazy fellows from the demon realm. However, the difference was that these demon beasts had much higher cultivation levels. In the past, most of the demon beasts from the demonic calamity were at the Xian immortal stage. There had never been any golden immortal demon beasts. Even if Gongsun Ling has refined a lot of monster realms and collected countless monsters, the golden immortal monster beasts inside were really rare. Occasionally there would be 1 or 2, which was very rare. However, Long Can and Long Ke had appeared with thousands of golden immortal demon beasts. This was a little abnormal. Yang Chun could only guess that in the monster realm that Long can refine, there were monsters in the core part of the monster realm, and their cultivation base was at the golden immortal level. Otherwise, after Long can had refined most of the demon beasts, he had used some method to forcefully raise their cultivation levels. Unlike Gongsun Ling, who collected the monster and immediately let the other party recover their sanity, Longkin did not have this condition and could only use other means to improve the cultivation of the monster. Although he didn't know what method Longkin had used, the appearance of so many demon beasts was definitely related to Long Yuan's reckless actions. At least in the eyes of Long Can and Long K, this battle with Ao Lan and Long Quang was a fair one. They wouldn't tolerate other cultivators interfering. If Long Yuan and the rest were like Yang Chun and only watched the battle without doing anything else, they probably wouldn't have caused Long Can to retaliate. Unfortunately, Long Yuan moved. Although he didn't attack directly, his actions made Long Can and Long K, who had been paying attention to this side, feel threatened. Therefore, they released a large number of golden immortal demon beasts to restrain the Long family's experts. Long Yuan was also a master who couldn't bear to rub sand in his eyes. In front of Yang Chen's family, Long Yuan could be very restrained. That was because Yang Chun used real strength to convince him. Now, no matter how high Long Can and Long K's cultivation levels were, they couldn't make him feel afraid. The moment the demon beasts appeared, Long Yuan let out an angry roar and started to provoke them. Demon beasts didn't have any consciousness, so they were barely controlled by Long Can. If not for the powerful spatial Dharma treasure, they would have already lost control. Now that Long Yuan still wanted to provoke him, he immediately rushed forward with a roar. The experts of the Long family were instantly surrounded. There were so many demonic beasts, but their emotions were the same. It was as if they had seen their king hanging on a tree, waiting for them to see him for the last time. Similarly, the frenzied demonic beasts had no concept of forbearance or cooperation at all. They pounced forward together. In the blink of an eye, the 6 experts of the Long family were engaged in a battle with countless golden immortal demon beasts. As for Yang Chun, he was also able to carefully observe the performance of these experts who belonged to the same bloodline of the Dragon Clan. Demonic beasts were, after all, demonic beasts. In the demon realm, these demonic beasts had no active intelligence, only the craziest killing intent. Even in the face of the most powerful race like the Dragon Clan, none of them backed down. This kind of berserk demonic beast that didn't know how to defend itself was the most difficult to deal with. Fortunately, the dragon race was still a powerful race after all. Whether it was in terms of battle experience or battle awareness, they were abnormally strong. In a battle of the same level, there were very few races that could stand shoulder to shoulder with the dragon race. Wisdom combined with power was the most terrifying strength. More often than not, it was more practical than reckless madness. The 6 experts of the Long family were in such a state. With a sway of their bodies, they put some distance between themselves and began their highly effective counterattack. They were all golden immortals, but when a demonic beast fought against a dragon, even the weakest, Long Yuan, it could only be abused. The experts of the Long family in their dragon form were almost unharmed by the attacks of the demonic beasts. With a slight twist of their long bodies, they dodged most of the attacks. Then they would reach out with their claws, grab and throw, and a demonic beast would be thrown far away. The demonic beasts that were caught would first be half dead by the sharp claws of the Dragon Clan. Then, they would be thrown far away by a tremendous force before falling heavily to the ground. Basically, after a series of actions, a demonic beast would fall to the ground, either dead or half dead, unable to get up for a long time. However, no matter how powerful the Dragon Clan was, they were at a disadvantage in terms of numbers. There were only 6 experts of the Long family in total, while the demonic beasts surrounded them by tens of thousands. In terms of numbers, they could directly drown the Dragon Clan. Soon, the experts of the Long family were surrounded by layers upon layers of demonic beasts. Although they would not suffer great losses in a short period of time, it was certain that they would not be able to escape for a while. Long Can and Long K did not want the experts of the Long family to disturb their battle with Ao Lan and Long Quan. Thus, using this method to restrain the experts of the Long family was not unexpected. However, after most of the demonic beasts surrounded the experts of the Long family, a small portion of them turned their attention to Yang Chun and Ao Lai. Yang Chun and Ao Lai were very clear about their position. They were here to watch the battle and act as arbitrators. They would not participate in the battle between the two sides. In fact, that was what they were doing. They just sat by the side, drinking wine and watching the show. Even so, some demonic beasts still targeted them. Damn it, I can't even enjoy the show. Looking at the demonic beasts that were looking at them with malicious gazes, Yang Chun could not help but curse. Then he stood up angrily. They're here for you. Don't pretend that you don't understand. Ao Lai, who was standing by the side, mocked Yang Chun. He was still holding onto his wine cup and drinking it happily. I'll leave it to you. Don't put me in danger. Ao Lai was even more mischievous than Yang Chun. He directly pushed everything to Yang Chun. He knew his own limits. Although his cultivation was on par with Yang Chun's, his combat ability was on a completely different level. Yang Chun was the only cultivator that he knew whose combat ability could not be determined by cultivation alone. How troublesome! Yang Chun complained to Ao Lai. Then, he turned his gaze to Long Can and Long K, who were fighting on the other side. He scolded loudly. If you want a fair duel, then so be it. Is it interesting to play this kind of trick? After Xiao Chun finished cursing, he stretched out his hand and grabbed the claw of a demonic beast. With a casual swing, that demonic beast flew uncontrollably into the air and flew towards Long Can and Long Quebec. Yang Chun did not care if this would interfere with their fair duel. When Long Can and Long K sent out those demonic beasts, this battle was no longer fair. A large group of monstrous beasts had surrounded the experts of the Long family. It was not just to restrain them and prevent them from helping. The most important purpose was to put the experts of the Long family in danger and then divert Ao Lan and Long Quang's attention. After all, no matter what, the Long clan experts were Ao Lan subordinates. No matter what, she had to be distracted. Chapter 2446. One of Long Can's plans was to restrain the experts of the Long family. The other plan was to deal with Yang Chun. The feeling that Yang Chun gave Long Can and Long K was that he was mysterious, and they couldn't see through him at all. Even though they knew that Yang Chun was only at the peak of the Immortal stage, the two of them didn't dare to believe that they could deal with Yang Chun easily. The impression that Yang Chun had left on them in Yang Lan's sea of consciousness was too deep. Not only were they unable to find Yang Chun's whereabouts in their small sea of consciousness, but when Yang Chun killed Yang Lan, it left an indelible impression on them. Such a powerful and mysterious expert couldn't be judged by common sense. However, Long Can and Long K were always thinking about probing Yang Chun's strength. Now was a great opportunity. At most, they could push the blame onto Long Yuan's rash actions. If they didn't figure out Yang Chun's true strength, Long Can wouldn't know how to carry out his follow-up plan. He was a cautious guy. Even if he wasn't cautious, he had learned to be cautious after living under the Zhao family's roof for tens of thousands of years. Since they had already fallen out, why should he hide? This idea was directly seen through by Yang Chun. Since they had already been seen through, Long Can and Long K didn't hide anymore. They ordered the demonic beasts to pounce forward. Just as they gave the order, the demonic beast that Yang Chun had just swung crashed into the battle circle of the four of them. Boom, there was a loud sound. The pitiful demonic beast was turned into pieces of flesh and blood in the air. Even though it was already at the intermediate golden immortal stage, it wasn't even qualified to step into the battle circle of four-peak golden immortals. As soon as it came into contact with the boundary, it was torn into pieces by the omnipresent pressure. Long Can didn't even need to look to know what was happening in his spatial magic treasure. As long as he wanted to, he could know what was happening at any time. Moreover, this was the area that he was focusing on. How could he miss it? Yang Chun's casual grab and toss had shocked Long Can. This was something that obviously didn't conform to the common sense of the cultivation world. A junior at the peak of the mysterious immortal realm had casually grabbed and thrown a demon beast at the intermediate stage of the golden immortal realm, and the demon beast didn't even have the slightest strength to fight back. How could this be possible? Not to mention Long Can. Even Long K's pupils shrank when he saw this scene. This level of power was definitely not something they could ignore. This Yang Chun was more difficult to deal with than they had imagined. Just one demonic beast was enough to make Long Can and Long K feel this way. However, this was not the end. Yang Chun did not intend to stop here. There were still many demonic beasts charging over. Yang Chun stood there as if he had suddenly grown many arms. If one were to look at it with a naked eye, they would only be able to create afterimages. Long Can and Long K couldn't imagine it. How could an ordinary human cultivator cultivate to such a level? His arms moved very quickly, but his aim was not bad either. Every time Yang Chun stretched out his hand, he would be able to accurately grab a certain part of a demonic beast's body. Then, Yang Chun would ignore everything else and throw the demonic beast he grabbed towards Long Can and Long Quebecu. With an intense whistling sound, these demonic beasts landed coldly in Long Quang and Ao Lai's hands. The battle was whistling. The demonic beasts that charged in, regardless of whether it was their flesh or blood, were all shattered or turned into nothingness in the formless battle. However, Long Can and Long K had already started to feel that something was wrong. Yang Chun grabbed the direction in which these things were thrown. It was not so appropriate to say that their battle circle was clearly directed at their bodies. If he had simply grabbed the demonic beasts and thrown them over, it would have been fine. The aftermath of the battle between four peak golden immortals was enough to tear these demonic beasts apart. However, the demonic beast that Yang Chun had thrown over carried an unparalleled amount of strength. This caused Long Can and Long K to have a headache. Even if the battle strength of both sides could tear these golden immortal demonic beasts apart, golden immortals were still golden immortals. At this level, tearing them apart required a lot of strength. At the start, they didn't feel it. It was very simple to just tear them apart. However, as the demonic beast that Yang Chun had thrown became stronger and stronger, it wasn't as easy anymore. Every time Long Can and Long K killed a demonic beast, they had to expend a lot of energy. In particular, they had to buffer the strength of the demonic beasts so that the demonic beast bodies wouldn't directly collide with them. That force easily broke through their protective spiritual power. It was as easy as using a stone to break through a window. They had to expend a lot of energy to do so. After dozens of consecutive hits, Long Can and Long K slowly calmed down. If Yang Chun was only at this level, then Long K was only at this level. He wasn't worth being so careful with. However, just as this thought appeared in his mind, the demonic beast that Yang Chun had thrown over was already screaming as it streaked through the air. That pitiful demonic beast was even burning red from the friction between its body and the air. What was going on? Long Can and Long K were shocked. They instinctively felt that something was wrong. Their bodies curled up and their foreclaws reached for the red, demonic beast meat. The demonic beast was already dead before it could even enter the battlefield. All that was coming towards them was its corpse. Pong! The demonic beast's corpse easily broke through the spiritual power that was everywhere in the battlefield. It was torn into 7 or 8 pieces by the spiritual power. However, the larger piece still flew towards Long Can and Long K in the wrong direction. Boom! Long Can and Long K's claws collided with the piece of demonic beast meat. The moment they collided, Long Can and Long K felt an irresistible force crash into their claws and then into their bodies. Whoosh! Long Can and Long K flew back involuntarily, their bodies still curled up into a ball. As they flew, Long Can and Long K's heads involuntarily vomited a mouthful of blood. If you want to fight, then fight seriously. Don't think of such nonsense. Yang Chen's voice was filled with warning as it rang out in Long Can and Long K's ears. If you continue to play such probing tricks, I will not be polite anymore. Are you trying to bully with numbers? Long Can's ears perked up as he loudly reprimanded. This was something that Long Qin had learned from his interactions with the Zhao clan. No matter what, he had to be reasonable first. If you really want to bully with numbers, do you still think you can keep your life? Yang Qin's voice came from afar, filled with disdain. Then, it turned into impatience. Are the two of you still going to fight or not? Are you going to continue or admit defeat and accept Big Sister Aolan's punishment? Don't stand there and force logic just because you have the upper hand.